10-4 drivers, welcome to the Channel 19 Experience Trucker Podcast. This is where the real stories roll, straight from the blacktop.
Breaker 19 villains, you got your ears on. I'm your host Tony. Welcome to the Trucker Podcast. It's Sunday, June 15th, and it's also Father's Day. So happy Father's Day to all you fathers, grandfathers, great-grandfathers, stepfathers, father figures. Hopefully you've all got a chance to spend some time with those fathers in your life, or at least talk to them on the phone. Send them a message. Trucking's tough. It's a tough business to be a father in. It's a tough business to have a father in. So even if that relationship isn't perfect, today's a new day. Take a chance, reach out, whether you're in the right, whether you're in the wrong, whether you're the father or the son or the daughter. You never know when there isn't going to be another day. So reach out today, say Happy Father's Day, and reconnect with those folks in your life. In the pre-trip this week, we've got one item for the bulletin board that came out on social media I wanted to discuss. And then my second pre-trip topic is maybe I was wrong. Maybe I do want Waymo after all. We've got two interviews this week. As promised last week, I sit down in person. That's first here on the podcast. Sit down interview in person with longtime friend Eric Verdiguel. I'm going to slide the money line in between the two interviews this week. In the money line this week, I'm going to talk about a little debate I got into on Facebook. I try not to do it, but sometimes I just find myself in the middle of one, and so I'll talk a little bit about that. And then in the second interview this week, and also another first for the podcast, we have a returning guest. Mike Ritzema from Superior Trucking Payroll Service rejoins us to talk about per diem this time. Don't forget to hang around after the interviews for the post trip. Let's get this rig rolling. If you're not driving, it's a great time to like, follow, subscribe, and share the podcast with your friends.
Paper breaker 19, can I get a radio check? Pretty quiet out here on Channel 19. Well, there's a plain white rapper taking pictures at the state line. Hit the jake brake quick, we ain't paying no fines. The driver swing into the interstate, body shop south at exit 5. Building trucking ain't the same as it was. We're the last of our kind.
At the Mid-America Truck Show, I had the fortune to meet up with Mike Barber, founder of Truckers Wealth. Both of us have a passion for understanding the uniqueness of truckers and sharing our knowledge wherever we can. Mike is a seasoned financial professional. He has over 20 years of dedicated experience serving the trucking industry. Truckers Wealth has created a specialized financial hub where truckers can receive expert advice and tailored solutions to build wealth, minimize taxes, and secure lifetime income for themselves and their families. Check out his website, truckers-wealth.com, and look forward to seeing him on the program here soon. Grab that safety vest and let's do our pre-trip. A quick hitter at the top here. Last week I mentioned schools are getting out and to be aware of the different traffic patterns and young drivers who are going to be out at different times than what we're used to throughout the school year. Also, Big Cal made some posts this week that reminded me also that this is the season for drivers having the opportunity to bring their kids out in the rig with them a little more often. So that means more kids in truck stops, parking lots. So have some extra caution in those places as well. They're not used to being in those places. They don't know where to look. They're not truck drivers. They don't know what you're likely to do. So keep an extra eye out for them and use some extra caution this summer. I've also noticed that old people like me and some of you have a tendency to complain about younger generations not having the same level of etiquette or behavior. And it made me think that kids learn quite a bit from us, whether we know it or not, and especially by observing us. So part of us molding the younger generations is how we behave, the language that we use, how we interact with others. So be good examples out there. We're going to have more kids in truck stops. We're going to have more kids around. And as Gandhi said, be the change you wish to see in the world. On to the bulletin board. One bulletin board topic for this week. It came off of Reddit again. There's tons of material in Reddit. Like if you're ever bored, just go on the trucker groups in Reddit. There's like 300,000 people in there or something. And it's quite active and entertaining, head scratching at times. But there's material there, that's for sure. So the one I grabbed this week was kind of interesting. The post was, "How are y'all finding people to talk to?" And I'll summarize their post. The post goes something like this: "My friend group is diminishing. I have a group of 3 friends, but they're busy. They only want to text. And so, how are you making new friends out here? Some people have suggested try a Facebook group." And then the comments come in. Of course, there was 100+ comments that came in on this one. A bunch of the comments went along the lines of, "That's the great part of being out in a truck. You don't have to talk to anyone." Or, "I do this job because I don't have to talk to anyone." Fair points. And I agree. There's things I miss about being behind the wheel. And one of them is the ability to draw a boundary around how much effort I have to put into communicating with people on my terms, more so than when you're in amongst society more. There's a comfort at times in the solitude of it and the control over it in particular. But that's not particularly helpful here to the OP, the original poster. There were some comments that chimed in about maybe imaginary friends or talk to the voices. One person went with an oldie but goodie, which was, "Don't be afraid to say hello to someone at a truck stop." By this point in the back and forth between the OP and the commenters, I deduced the OP is a woman, which confused me because I always thought it would be much easier if you're a woman to strike up a conversation or get a conversation. I thought it was just a bit awkward amongst kind of the antisocial men of the group to try to have a conversation that went beyond the traffic or a practical moment of the day, except late at night on the CB, and then all bets were off on what topic might come up. So that was kind of interesting that it turned out that it was a woman. That brings a whole different level of complexity into it because let's face it, I think we've all observed the conversational treatment of women over the years. Let's say a lot of those starters to conversations probably don't lead to the types of conversations that the OP was looking for. And upon kind of further description of what they were looking for is stimulating conversation, not that kind of stimulating, it didn't seem, at least for this topic, and also friendly debates and discussions, things beyond just the weather, where the Smokies are at, and what the traffic conditions are. One person said they were considering becoming a truck driver, and upon hearing the challenges faced or the lack of socialization needed for the job, that sealed the deal for them and they were ready to become a trucker. My contribution to the discussion ended up being to offer up the podcast and the community around the podcast as an option. I offered for them to come on the show and let's talk about this topic, first of all, because it's an interesting topic to me and one that I struggled with at times. There were times where, and still times where, I have a desire for the isolation and the control over how much interaction I have to make a mental effort to deal with. But the flip side of that is the loneliness and the losing of friends, especially when I was getting started and a lot of you were getting started. When you were heading out for the week or for a long stretch, that was it. You weren't talking to those people again till you got back home for the most part. When you made the choice to become a truck driver, you seriously diminished your ability to maintain friendships and things like that. Any friend that I had at that point kind of exited from my universe most of the time, unless you run into somebody when you're back home or in a bar out having dinner or at church or something like that. But that seriously degrades the level of the friendship when you only have communication on rare occasions like that. It's just something that's been a part of trucking all along. Technology has helped bridge that gap quite a bit. But if, like the OP said, they only want to text and you're looking for fulfillment in a conversational, a little bit more personal experience, like texting doesn't really solve that. So even though we have these technology tools, time is still a challenge, coordination is still a challenge, irregular hours and things like that play into it from a truck driver's perspective, as well as people have their own lives who aren't truck drivers, whether that's kids, jobs, things like that. So it's a continuous challenge that I think is a very interesting topic to hear, especially what's been working for them. And some of those ideas may pay dividends to people who are feeling a bit of an imbalance. Because some days, let's be honest, silence is awesome. but other days it can be a prison as well in the cab of that truck. So I offered up the opportunity to come on the show. Let's talk about it and also talk about what you're looking for, right? Because I think one thing that's hard to figure out is what do you want to talk about? What's interesting to you may not be interesting to me. I don't like anime. I'm not a huge fan of most jazz music. But if that's your jam, our conversations are probably going to struggle. Nothing against those things. I like history, literature, philosophy. That isn't everyone's jam either. Sometimes it works and sometimes you just move on. But I think it's an important topic. It plays a lot into the mental health of truck drivers or any job where you spend a significant time alone. Are you getting the kind of stimulation and human interaction that makes you happy? Everybody has a different level of desire for those things. And like I said, that changes. It could be on an hour by hour basis. Sometimes the phone ringing may drive you to being infuriated that someone's bothering you. Other times you may be thinking, man, I wish somebody would just call or call me back. There's no universal right answer here. There's just your answer in any moment and how to fulfill it. Well, maybe imaginary people and voices aren't a very good way to solve the problem, but what do I know? I'm not a therapist. I'm curious what y'all think. Have you struggled with losing friends or not finding the right amount of interaction and having it affect your happiness or mental well-being out on the road? I'll throw up a question on the Facebook page. Chime in. And if the OP does tune into the podcast, the offer's always on the table, and it's on the table for anybody who wants to talk about topics like this. It doesn't have to be this podcast or community either. There's lots of types of trucking communities out there. Truckers are a diverse bunch. There's a clan out there somewhere for everyone, I bet. In the final topic of the pre-trip this week, I had the kind of week that made me reevaluate my earlier position on Waymo. If you recall back in episode number 5, I shared my experience with Waymo, where I had some pointed complaints about Waymo software and the driving techniques their software employed being in a non-Waymo car. Wasn't thrilled with their machine's training. Let's put it that way. And we've been talking a lot lately about English language proficiency and truckers. And this past week, I was working over in Oklahoma City. And when I travel for work these days, I use a lot less of my own car and rental cars, and I use a lot of ride sharing apps. I use a few different ones to price shop, but this week it was Lyft. And on a typical week like this where I travel, I use between maybe 6 and 10 rides on the various platforms. Getting to and from airports, to and from the office, from the hotel, out to eat. And some of my rides this week were disturbing. About 50% of them were. That's how I'd put it. Disturbing's fair. And the one I wanted to talk about was my first one here in Phoenix that was particularly rough. It was my ride to the airport, so roughly a 40-minute ride depending on traffic. The driver shows up at the house. I grab one last kiss goodbye for my wife and stroll out to the car, and I'm greeted with a smile. Younger guy, and the first thing he said to me as he grabs my bag is, "You speak Spanish?" Which kind of caught me off guard as the first interaction. But it's not uncommon here in Phoenix. Plenty of people who feel comfortable with Spanish first as opposed to English first. And I do speak some Spanish from my college classes and time that I spent living in Argentina and significant time visiting Spain. It's awful rusty, but I can survive. I reply un poquito, which means a little, and so we get going. It's a few miles from my place up to the 10, and the first thing I noticed, and anyone who's driven a lot like we have, or spent time in other countries watching other people drive is you notice that people have different habits, right? Different ways of asserting themselves in traffic or managing through traffic that, and even different parts of the country, there's different levels of behavior, right? Wyoming is not the same driving habits in New York City. So anyway, I was picking up on some of his driving behaviors and going, I don't feel like you've probably driven here very long, especially when it gets to merging and turning. And in America, we have, for the most part, lines everywhere to shepherd people's behavior, and we tend to more or less follow the lines. But in other countries, lines are either non-existent or vague or even signs, and so it's more of a kind of everybody sorts it out as you go. And I was detecting a lot of the sorting it out as we go and not really either expecting other people to follow the lines or the driver actually following the lines and kind of the normal routine here in America. So anyway, just something I noticed as we're driving. and we get up to the 10, and it's getting kind of hot in the car, right? We're in Phoenix. It's June. We're hitting the 110s here on a regular basis now, and the AC wasn't turned up very high. So I asked him to turn up the AC in my broken Spanish. We fumbled back and forth a bit until he understood what I was asking, and I thought we were on the right path. So he looked at the controls for the air conditioning, and then he didn't do anything. And I'm like, maybe we didn't get on the same page. And then headed down the 10, he whips out his phone and he pops open Google Translate and he holds up the image, basically the camera part, and which will translate anything you put in the view of the camera in whatever language you tell it to. And so he uses Google Translate to figure out which buttons to use on the air conditioning, which added to my level of concern about the overall safety of this journey. But on we went. We've got places to be and things to do. So as we get close to the airport, and driving on the interstate doesn't require a lot of sign reading, but as you get close to the final destination, especially in an airport, details start to matter. As we're getting close to the airport, you could tell he was trying to pay attention a lot closer and that he was not understanding what the signs had to say, that he couldn't decipher any of the signs, where to go, not in the appropriate lanes, slowing way down, last second jabs into other lanes. And so I jumped in. And luckily, the words that I know the best still in Spanish, even though I haven't used a lot of Spanish lately, are the ones that were needed in this scenario. Like this one, that one, right here, this lane, left, right, things like that. So I was able to navigate us in, and we got there. A few probably irritated bystanders involved in the process, but we got there. That is true. Overall, the experience kind of disturbing. You know, I've driven in other countries, left side of the road, right side of the road, UK, Ireland, Spain, France, a little bit of Portugal, Argentina, Chile. And no, I didn't have to pass any proficiency examination to drive a car in those countries. I mean, the most that you really have to do as an American is pay your $20 to AAA. They kind of have the monopoly on the market of translating driver's license into an acceptable format for whatever country requires it. Even a lot of countries claim they require it, but most people don't even bother to go do it. I tend to do it because I'd rather not have this discussion on the side of the road with a French police officer or patrolman about why I don't have anything that they can read in French. You can pretty much drive anywhere in the world with an American driver's license and a translation, no proficiency test. So I guess what's good for the goose in the world is good for the gander here in America. Last year, my wife and I went to France and I rented a car for a couple weeks. And beforehand, I mean, I watched a bunch of videos, read a bunch of articles, studied up on the signs, which ones meant what are we really talking about here, and which words particular might I be most likely to need, like departures and arrivals and do not enter and parking language, things like that, so that I could be somewhat prepared. And yeah, a few times I did have to whip out Google Translate and go, what the heck does this sign say? Can I park here for overnight or for 2 hours or no parking whatsoever? Like, I don't really want to have to sort out recovering my car from a tow facility in France while I'm on vacation. Also, I'm a tourist. I'm not doing this for a living in France. And so, I mean, that seems to be kind of where a logical person might want to draw a line and say, not just big rigs like we've been talking about here. There's an extraordinary jump up to big rig category of vehicles just because of the mass and the amount of damage that you can do. But still, as a commercial driver, like somebody who's going to drive for a living in this country, taxi driver, Lyft driver, Uber driver, whatever the case might be, bus driver, shuttle van driver, like it seems that the bar should be applied probably higher than it is to Lyft drivers. And I don't understand Lyft, right? Lyft is a commercial business. The driver is essentially a commercial vehicle driving and approved by Lyft. I'm supposing, right? There's always the case that Lyft would say, yeah, we didn't approve this driver. And this was kind of somebody gamed the system to get a person with this level of English proficiency and licensing into this scenario. But I mean, by all appearances, it looked like it was approved by Lyft. All of it kind of seems like a stretch that this is a good idea. Then it got me thinking on this ride, like, I wonder, especially as I got to the airport and I started seeing all the Waymos, I was like, maybe I owe Waymo a mea culpa, an apology, and should ask them when they're going to start servicing my area. Because I think I would have preferred Waymo as opposed to the experience I just went through that was a bit nerve-wracking. One thing I wanted to mention too, kind of at the bottom line of this, which is we got there safely in the end. He was a very nice guy, upbeat guy. We went back and forth as best we could in his non-existent English and my terrible Spanish. And so we talked about what I did for work and where I was going. And at the end of the trip, we bumped fists. I think I was probably a little more excited that we made it successfully than he was. He dropped me off. I wished him well. And in this case, all's well that ends well, I guess. But he was a good guy, and he was happy and upbeat. It just was all a bit disconcerting to me and made me think of my Waymo conversations a couple months back. So that's the pre-trip for this week. No defects detected, but that's just my opinion. If you find defects, let me know. Get that seat adjusted. We've got the interview with Eric coming up next. Let's push the buttons in. We've got work to do. Trans Carolina Permits is based out of North Carolina. They've been in business since 1977, and they've got a team with a ton of experience in all of our favorite part of trucking, which of course is the government. They provide a portfolio of services for the trucking industry, not to mention they have a compliance program. They'll help you with clearinghouse setup and queries, IFTA and mileage reporting, so your state-by-state mileage, your fuel purchase tracking, and get that wrapped up into a nice little bundle for quarterly filings. They're a one-stop shop for your trucking needs. You can find them on Facebook and LinkedIn, or check out their website, transcarolinapermits.com, or give them a call at 1-800-899-4870.
It's by truckers for truckers. This is the Channel 19 Experience. Let's hit the road.
Well, tonight, as promised, I've got as a guest this week a longtime friend. Seems to be a theme lately. A lot of longtime friends joining in to the podcast. Eric Verdiguel, welcome to the show, buddy.
Appreciate the invite. Thanks, Tony.
Yeah. So you're my first interviewee that I've actually had content kind of prepared for. I have another one of my buddies. Just great timing today. He sent me a little clip, and since you're from Dallas, and we go back a long ways, so he sent me over this press release that basically said Dak Prescott has released a new cologne. It's called INT, and it's for those nights when you don't want to score. So.
I was curious as to how long it was going to take until I got a Dallas Cowboy jab. Didn't take too long, but it's good. It's good to have it. It's good to have it. I'm ready. You know what?
I couldn't even wait to slip it in later. Like, I had to get that one in right away. So shout out to my buddy Matt, Packers fan, longtime Packers fan from Superior, Wisconsin, sent that in. He didn't know I was having a Cowboys fan as a guest today, but so welcome to the show.
I appreciate
Proper
it.
ribbing to get us started.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, man. So you and I go ways back, but your trucking career goes even further back than when you and I met, or your involvement in the trucking industry. So did you grow up in trucking, or how did you get into this crazy business?
So I'd like to, when I talk about the trucking side and how I got into it, I always like to put a little asterisk to it, right? So my dad retired FedEx, put 25 years at FedEx as a dispatcher, and we're talking in the small parcel delivery piece of it. So I wouldn't say trucking to beginning. This is the transportation side of it. And so when I was going to school in criminal justice and sociology, because I wanted to become good at the civil service. I wanted to become a cop. I wanted to be a fireman or something to that effect. And trucking was never really kind of brought up. But then lo and behold, get married. Wife said, nah, you're not getting into that. Right? So I started working for the government. I actually worked for the TSA for 5 years. And this whole time I'm asking my dad, hey, Dad, give me a job at FedEx. Give me a job at FedEx. He goes, absolutely not. You're not going to tread on my name. I've been there 25 years. Fortunately, about a year before his retirement, I kind of kept pestering him, right? And he's like, all right, I'll get you a job. And I started off as a part-time job. So I'm still working for the TSA during the morning, and at night I started driving a truck. And so that's where I got my first little taste of the transportation world, whereas I'm driving a truck for FedEx, doing pickups and deliveries. I drive pup trucks back from the station in Addison. So I'm born and raised in Dallas, right? That's why I bleed blue, and huge Cowboy fan for life. But I drive these pup trucks from Plano, where the station was, the DFW and back, and in the mornings we did first overnight deliveries. I'm going over there to pick it up, and so anyways, that was kind of my first taste into it. But then the leap from there was I didn't want to work for the government anymore, and that's for a completely different podcast, a whole nother platform as to why we get into that. But I had an opportunity to go work for JB Hunt. And JB Hunt is where I think I would say that's where I got my start. They allowed me to get a job there because of my FedEx experience. And then I go in there working for their dedicated contract services as a manager in training. And that's where I first got my exposure to the DOT side of the world, managing drivers. So shout out to John Vargo, Bill Dietrich, giving me my first shot in the transportation space over at JB Hunt. Those guys are still there. That's essentially where I got started. And so from dispatching trucks to managing accounts and getting into the transportation world, that's how I got into trucking in that aspect of it. And those guys, they love to pull me out into the field or out into the trucks just to experience what they experience. And I was willing. I mean, I was running different accounts for like Whirlpool, and they were running them from distribution centers to little depot centers and doing final mile deliveries. And I was out there helping them, deliver these dishwashers and washing machines and refrigerators. And I'd get in there just to kind of get an appreciation as to what they were doing. And man, they wear my butt out. But
like delivery to like little small town appliance stores, stuff like that? No. So, I mean, they were actually, to consumers, right? Oh, wow. So, a Whirlpool was an actual account that I think we had, was either Penske or Ryder was doing the final mile delivery, and JB Hunt went and got that contract. And so now all these dedicated contract services groups, right? They're like, okay, now you get to manage this portion of the delivery, the final mile side of it. And so that's where they started getting into final mile. And so I helped run one of the Whirlpool accounts. And so that's where I kind of got, like I said, they threw me out in the field, and we would leave. It'd be a JIT type thing, right? We're putting deliveries in. We're getting everything set up for a 6 a.m. delivery. So from Flower Mound, they'd be going up to Kansas. They'd be up in Oklahoma City here in this area, and Tulsa was another one. And trucks would be going out, unloading from there, and then the following day they're cross-docking and then getting all their final mile deliveries, and then I'd have to manage those guys making the final deliveries at those different little terminals or spokes, right? So that was kind of where I ended up. That was at my tenure, at the end of tenure, that's what I was doing. But I'd spent so much time in the intermodal space and kind of doing those runs to Hazlitt, you name it. I worked with all different accounts there. Chet Pallets for my buddy Joshua Vance and I. He had some good times out there in the Alliance area. I was driving out there and managing those guys and routing and scheduling. I mean, that was my full introduction into the trucking space. And then from there, just didn't stop. Just always kind of kept growing, going to experiencing different parts of the actual transportation arena, I guess. Mm-hmm. I can't remember. Did you say that you had a stint at, was it McLean?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. So, I mean, we'll kind of do the journey.
Yeah.
From JB Hunt, I had put in about 4 years, starting off as a DMIT, what they call them, my little district manager in training, to running the account. I had an opportunity to go work for a company called Taylor Gas and Liquids out in Mesquite, and they were a crude hauler, right? So that's where I got my introduction into the oil and gas space on the transportation side. What really was the selling point for them to hire me was I was playing in the technology side at JB Hunt, teaching guys how to use their Qualcomms at the time. They were using Omnitracks, or actually technically it was Qualcomm back then. They were using the ELDs. And then one of the accounts I was helping was at Cargill. They were running Cargill, and so they're using handhelds, and so I'm teaching guys how to print their tickets and use that whole piece. Well, this company was acquired in Mesquite. They moved in from Winsboro, and they brought in their CEO. Shout out to Les Carmichael. He used to run MS Carriers out of Arizona. He came and he ran this. He brought in this team to kind of digitize the oil and gas space. And what I mean is they wanted to get a dispatch system in there. They wanted to get an ELD system and a ticket printing system. So I mean, to be honest, they hired me because I was cheap and I knew all this technology, right? And so they're like, hey, come on. And to me at the time, newlywed, no kids at the time. I think we might have been pregnant. Anyways, but it was close. And so they're like, yeah, let's bring them on. And so it was just something new to me. And so I went to go work for Taylor Gas and Liquids. And that's where I got my introduction into basically the technologies. I was the operations analyst is what they gave me the title as, but it was a jack of all trades and a master of none. I set up their TMW system, which was their dispatch system, TMW suite. I implemented their TMT system, which is their maintenance and preventative maintenance system. And then, of course, PeopleNet. So they had PeopleNet there, and so I was there really in charge to help set up the platform, do all the forms where they're doing arrivals, departures, and printing tickets out. And so I really got into the technology side of this transportation space. So I always kind of evolved, right? First it was managing drivers, and now it was managing the technology of it. And so that's where my stint was. As much as I loved the oil and gas space, I always made a joke. It's either I'm having steaks for dinner every night, depending on how well the barrel was trading, or I'd have mayonnaise sandwiches, right? Just really depended, right? And so it was feast or famine, and I really couldn't, my heart couldn't take, okay, do I have a job, right? When business was booming, everybody was great. We're all having a great time. And then when it was, when it was close and it was nut cutting time, you're like, okay, am I still good, right? And so that's where I said, okay, maybe I didn't need an arena that was so volatile. And so fortunately, at the time, there was somebody that reached out saying that they were looking for somebody that knew and implemented the PeopleNet solution. So of course I had already set it up, and I've kind of known using the system in the past, implementing it, teaching it to these drivers, how do we using it, at least in the oil and gas space. I applied over at McLean, and it was McLean Food Service. It's different from the McLean Company, right? McLean Company has two different, they have a grocery division, they have a food service division. This food service division was based in Carrollton, which was right down the street from where I lived. And so it was really convenient. And the other big allure, that is the reason why I moved from Taylor over to McLean, is I did travel. I traveled quite a bit, but when I traveled with Taylor Gas and Liquids, I was going to beautiful cities like Waymo, Montana, and like Fargo, right, North Dakota, Bismarck, right, you name it. I mean, we're going up there and golly, what was the one in Louisiana? Eunice. I was going to the Eunice, Louisiana, little dispatch office in Eunice. The fact that not a lot of people know where those places are, that's where you knew it was a small little town. It was close to Lafayette, but anyways, I digress. But from there, I was like, okay, if I'm going to travel, give me to a city where I can at least, see some people, right, and not so much cows. So at the end of the day, they offered me a position as a systems engineer over at McLean, and I helped support all of their, at the time I think it was 18 distribution centers, where we helped implement PeopleNet, made sure that the drivers were using it properly, and then of course from there, the one thing that good old Chris Peterson over that PeopleNet, he had sold them was their the fuel mileage, right? How can we help him in our MPG program? And so what they said, my boss, good old Richard Schmitty, shout out to that guy. Oh, and Cindy Stiles, can't forget you. They said, hey, we need to get some sort of ROI back on this system that we're getting, right? Other than our arrivals and departures and everything that they're doing on the food service delivery side, how can we implement this MPG program? And so I basically was like, okay, got it. That was my job. And sure enough, I'd go down there and we set up one of the distribution centers down in Houston and figured, all right, let's start it here. And sure enough, that's where we started gaining a lot of traction on where's the baseline, how do we improve it? And that stop in McLean helped me appreciate more of the telematics data. Like, how are we utilizing this data? How can it affect the bottom line? Yeah. So getting into those little data points made me realize, okay, yeah, there is something here on the telematics data, right? So how do we handle that data? So I learned a lot about that piece of it. And so, once again, I enjoyed that job. It was great, but the travel was pretty intense when you have 18 distribution centers and people are needing to implement different portions of the business. Because I didn't take just the telematics side or the ELD side. I mean, I took on warehouse projects and some other things that they're asking me to do, just because, you know what, that's the one thing that I would say that my old man taught me. Is if somebody asks you to do something, just say yes. Something else to learn, right? So you're constantly evolving. And to be honest, I think that's what's gotten me to where I am today, where I never said no. I'm like, okay, yeah, let's try it. If someone's willing to give me a try, then let's do it, right? And so sure enough, that's kind of where I kind of moved around there. And then the opportunity to go work at PeopleNet came after my experience with McLean. They had a position as a consultant available, and I had implemented the system, and I knew it, I wouldn't say inside and out, but I knew it pretty well. And they're like, hey, we just need you to go around to existing customers of PeopleNet, and how do we further utilize the system that they're getting? Buy in more? How do we better leverage it? How do we get them to get their ROI? Sell some some professional services and upsell some different products in there. And so yeah, great. That's kind of how I got to that world, right? And then, sure enough, I remember I was with Mike Eccleston. He really took me under his wing. He really helped me out on the consulting side, and really more of how do you dig into the business side of this world, right? Not so much the nuts and bolts of the technology, not so much the usage of how it's being done, right? But really more getting an understanding beyond that into the business side. How does it affect everybody else in the business, from HR and safety to operations to maintenance, and how does all of these little things intertwine? And so he really helped me learn how to ask the question and understand a little bit more about the business side of it. And I would say that would help me more later on down the road. It's because now I knew what questions to ask. Not just, I know how the system works and I know how to get the best out of it, but it was the why. Why do I need to do this? And so he kind of helped me understand that piece. And so we would do all sorts of discovery sessions, on the professional service side. And then we'd hand off our findings off to the salespeople. And then these guys would go and close it and then, drive away in their nice little fancy cars. And I said, you know what? I want to be able to sell. And I got a shout out to those two guys there, my mentors there, people that really helped me, is Krumhauer and John Krumhauer and Nick Hillesheim. They took me under their wing and they put me through the ringer, right, to see if I had the chops to do it. And sometimes I never thought I'd be able to make it, right? But they taught me a whole bunch of not just how to sell, but how to listen, really. How to listen and how to position. And I think that's a dying art in a lot of sales organizations, that they forget how to ask the right question and to be able to listen. And they basically stripped me down on how I thought I knew the world worked when it comes to operations, and say, you know what, you don't know everything. At least give the perception that you don't know. So ask questions and then just sit down, listen, and shut up. And I take that and I run with it, and I use it, almost daily. And I've incorporated it in my life to make sure that I understand certain things, right? Just to see what people are actually saying, not just to say it, but see if there's meaning behind it.
And
anyway.
Give them the room to share their story and get invested in the conversation.
I'll tell you a funny story. I would say funny story. They said, hey, I need you to go read this book and let me know when you're done. And it was so funny with those two guys. Everything was like a test to see how willing you were to kind of get something done. So like, I need you to, this Dale Carnegie book, I need you to read it and let me know when you're finished with it. How to Win Friends and Influence Others. I thought that was probably the most important book that I had ever read up to that point in my life, because it's not about you, it's about others, right? And so that's where I've always felt like, okay, I was successful because, I don't say successful, I hate to use that word. I did okay because I did it for others, right? I did it for others, the others in my world at PeopleNet were the drivers. They were the small trucking companies that were just trying to make it. How do we keep drivers in the driver retention piece? That's, we're all struggling to put drivers in seats. So how do you keep them happy? How do you keep them, compensated? So a lot of these MPG programs that we would talk about is like, hey, we're going to save you a lot of money by doing this. You're paying less in fuel. Let's turn that around and give it back to the drivers in some form or fashion. There was always the story that over at Mesilla Valley, they'd give away a Harley every quarter, right? They've now changed that over, and they're giving away Priuses now for, to be more fuel efficient, right, to kind of fit the model. But we use that, at least I use that to say, give that back to your guys, right? Because that's who's driving your products. That's what's moving your freight, is these guys behind the seat, 14 hours a day, lonely for the most part, right? Their lives it's a rough life, right? And so that's where I was like, that drove a lot of what I was doing.
Well, one thing I was going to interject in there, and we were talking about South Texas and down on the Rio Grande border, and I had an MPG program that I ran down there, and they were hesitant, right? To your point, you started to show them the numbers and the impact that you could make with the program, and their eyes light up, and then, you start to have the discussion about, okay, how do you use this as a tool to retain your best drivers and encourage drivers to do better? Because that thing can grow if you put the right lever into it and give people an incentive to do better. You'll get some guys who do better just because they look at the chart on the wall and go, yeah, I got to be better than that guy.
Yeah.
Right. So but that only gets you so far, right? Not everybody kind of has that competitive mindset. So, but other people may be motivated by a money incentive. Right. Hey, if you can hit 7 miles per gallon, we'll give you an extra 2 cents a mile on that quarter, or whatever the case might be. And it was funny. It was 5 brothers who owned the company, and they were like, "Yeah, what do you think if we just didn't give it to them? Like, what do you think would be the negative ramifications?" And I'm like, "Well, because their concern was like, some of these guys do really good already, and we don't even have to pay them. So why?" We'd rather not pay them if they, just to keep doing what they've already doing well. And I'm like, yeah, but you do realize you're running the risk that guy leaves, and all the ones that don't drive as well, they stay.
Right.
So, you might as well build a culture of good driving habits that produce good MPG results. And before you are standing here being the guy who's all the 6 MPG guys are here and all your 7.5 MPG guys are gone.
Right. I used that same approach because I had somebody say, what if I don't want to give the money back to them? And I said, look, in my world, perception is reality. So guess what? What does it cost you for a week's vacation? Get them a cruise. Put the cruise out there as the prize. I'm going to give you a week for 2 people on a cruise. At the time, I think you can get it for 2 people was like $900. This was maybe 7, 8 years ago. So you're saying you're not willing to invest $900 and give your guy the time off to save hundreds of thousands of dollars based over the full size of your fleet? Because if they're all working towards it, they're like, I get a free vacation. And I'm like, hey, guess what? Do a top 10 and give away 10 of these, and you're still at what, $9,000, and you've saved $80,000 over a 2-month period, or whatever the case was, right? I'm like, that right there is well worth it, because now you can spin it as to drivers' well-being. Once again, perception is reality. You don't really, I don't care if you really don't care about your drivers, but at least give them the perception that they are, right? And that's, and mind you, there's
It's a business.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it.
We could talk about our culture of family and everything else. Like, okay, the culture that interests most everybody is what's at the bottom line of that paycheck.
Right. That's exactly it. And so, I use that, right? And sure enough, that's kind of how I think that's where the trajectory of my career started to take off. Was, okay, this is something I'm passionate about. I can talk to it, because normally people can sense if you're uncomfortable, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. They're going to be able to sniff it out. And for some reason, this came really easy to me, because once again, I was like, how are we helping the people in this industry, right? How are we helping the drivers? How do we keep these guys going? How do we keep them taken care of, right? And so from there, the like I said, I had a trajectory from, selling into the mid-market up into the enterprise sales. And once you get into the enterprise sales, it's a little different, right? And lo and behold, things happen, change, companies have their shortcomings. And at that point, it was time to move on. And so I've been chasing that feeling for a while. And so I kind of got into the TMS world, had a little stint in the supply chain space, and, just
That feeling of being passionate about
about what I'm doing, right? Other than just trying to make somebody else richer, I guess, right? Or making sure the stock price stays high, So I was always kind of grabbing like, where am I happy at, right? And so, fortunately from there, I had a couple of stints and kind of went around the way, and then kind of founded the organization that I'm at today. And sure enough, that one right there is where I feel that passion has been relit, right? Selling kind of driver distraction and fatigue monitoring systems, right? So that's kind of where I'm at today, a company called S1E Machines. And, it's like it's been reunited. I mean, reignited, that feeling of here's what I'm doing, right? And I mean, I can go off in personal story as to why, I remember falling asleep. I crashed my Tesla. I was driving a Tesla down to San Antonio, thinking the autopilot would work. I fell asleep. It was like 2 a.m, and ran into a wall right in there in Temple, right? And so just because I fell asleep, I pulled the little thing and just tired, and sure enough, I hit the wall. And so it was a real personal thing. I'm like, okay, things happen, right? The product that we're selling today, it's how do we intervene before that happens, right? And so that's where I'm like, okay, yeah, that's where I want to be. So, I mean, that's technically my trucking journey, right, as to kind of where I'm at. And shout out to my wife for coming at 3 a.m. to come pick me up. So.
Well, it happens fast.
Yeah.
Too, right?
Oh, yeah.
You think it's not going to be an issue, and boom, next thing. I mean, I had one when I was young too, where I was driving home to Minnesota and woke up in the median, right, going 60 miles an hour in the median, and going, where am I, and how the hell do I get back onto the pavement before I hit that U-turn lane coming at me, and the moment before, I wouldn't have guessed that was going to happen in the next 3 seconds. Yeah. But it does.
Fascinating. So that's a long way of saying that's my trucking journey as to kind of how I've gotten there. So to say that it's been a while since I got behind the wheel of a truck, it has, but the experiences that I've had, with everyone that I interact with, it's like I never stopped, right? Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, it's fun when you and I have been at a few of these stops together along the way and stayed in touch even when we weren't at the same stops at the same moments. But so it's great to see the passion that you have doing the thing and working with people on, getting a product that makes a difference into people's vehicles and it makes us all safer.
Yeah, absolutely. Plus, it was easy to kind of keep track of you because I wanted to make myself feel better playing around golf. I know I can always play with you. Yeah, I'm not that bad.
Well, so the other topic that we wanted to talk about tonight was something else that you're involved with.
Yeah. So during my many stops, and I've liked these guys because I really think that they got something going, right? And it's this organization that's based out of Fort Worth, right? And these guys, I had sold them a TMS solution a couple years back, and what they're trying to do is really help the small trucking companies. And I mean small trucking companies, owner-operators got maybe 1 truck, 2 trucks that want to grow. Or somebody that owns a couple of trucks and just don't want to manage it, right? And these guys, the name of the company is Big Rig Fleet Services. And like I said, they're based out of Fort Worth. But they do essentially manage services. And when I had originally I just sold them their dispatch system, and getting to know them a little bit more and kind of what they were trying to do, I was like, man, once again, I like this because they're giving back to this, I would say, a neglected part of the trucking community. Everybody wants to deal with a trucking company that's established, right? But then how do you get established and how do you grow a business if you're never given a shot, right? And
you got everything working against you at that size, right?
Right.
You don't have the economies of scale of the mega carriers. You don't have the discounts, the tires, the fuel, everything else. And, you know, they get economies of scale because they have 30,000 trucks and they learn how to do things really, really efficiently. But if you got 5,
Yeah.
I was that guy.
Yeah,
right?
that's
Doing
exactly.
everything manually, just everything's 10 times as hard, 10 times more manual, right?
Yeah, and the cool thing is they kind of take this co-op approach, right? And so, you know, some of the office, they're able to pass through some of these fuel discounts and some of these discounts when it comes to compliance and IFTA fuel report, your IFTA reporting, your DOT compliance pieces. I mean, insurance, they offer insurances, but like I said, they have a whole litany of different services.
And they do dispatching and stuff too.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. And the one thing that I thought was really intriguing is, okay, I got 2 trucks. Me, owner, I'm driving a truck. I have no time to be actually sending an invoice. Because let's say I'm actually done, I've pulled the load, I'm backing off the dock. I have to first get the heck out of the parking lot, figure out where I'm going, find my next load, and then once I do that, and during my 10-hour break, I'm sitting there like, okay, now I got to send an invoice. And now how long is it going to take to get that invoice paid? So now all of a sudden, my days to cash is almost 45 days. And so now, you know, they have basically said, look, we will take over the dispatching side. We'll help you find loads. If you want to bring a dedicated carrier or a shipper with us, with you, right, with the driver, the owner, operator, great. We'll just continue to do that. We'll have all your loads done. We'll help scheduling side of it. So now you're not focusing so much on the administrative side. They're taking a lot of that over. And then, of course, you know, factoring. Factoring, I think, is huge with a lot of these guys. These factoring companies, they're buying these invoices and they're taking percentages off of it. But what I do like about what these guys are doing is they're not taking as much. And what I mean is they're taking fractions of what other normal companies are doing because they want to give back to these guys, because they want to help them grow. Because guess what? One of the other services is equipment financing. So because now they're getting more money, then they want to say, hey, let's reinvest it and get another truck. So they want to help them grow. And so, like I said, it's a compounding piece that kind of gets over. And so I found that super intriguing to be like, okay, I like this. I like these guys and what they're doing, because once they started with a trucking company and they grew it, you know, up in the ag business years ago, and then they wanted to just pass on their expertise back onto people that, hey, do you want to start a trucking company? I think I recall you guys were talking, you and Verlin were talking about getting in and out of, man, I want to get out of the truck. Oh man, I want to get back into the truck, right? How do we keep those guys in the truck, right? What's the incentive to get in there? And if you can take the approach as like, hey, you're going to be a business owner and we're going to help you be a business owner. I think that's the allure of, I want to be my own boss, right? And I'm going to help you make sure you stay there. Oh, and by the way, if I help you do this, now I can help you get another truck. You want to get into another driver? You can find a driver, you can hire a driver. So now either your income can stay the same with your same 2 trucks and you're not driving it, or you can continue to generate more. And it's really up to you. And that's what these guys will help them do, right? It's what's your end goal, right? Because I think a lot of people go into trying to start a business without actually understanding what the hell they're doing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm sure you saw it at places like Hunt where they've got owner-operators and guys jumping in, you know, I like driving truck, but you know what? I want to drill a hole in the dash and put the CB where I want to. So by God, I'm going to buy a truck, and then I can put lug nut covers on it or whatever. It's my truck, and I can say no to the freight I don't want to go do. And you know, I talked about that with Michelle back on like episode 2, because you know what I saw working at Transport American, owning my own trucks, and just watching people get burned out of the industry. It wasn't burned out. Like a lot of great truckers get one way or another exited from the industry over all that other stuff, because let's face it, there's not that many people who are great at all aspects of a business. You even look at guys who are great CEOs, great sales reps. The sales reps are usually not the best accountants. You don't want the sales guys doing the accounting work. But you know what I mean? Like how many truckers really love paperwork and accounts payable and accounts receivable? Like, we hate that stuff, right?
Right.
That's part of the reason why we thought we were going into a cab in the first place, was to
Get away
escape
from that, yeah.
stuff. Well, this is a way to kind of, you called it managed services, another way of just saying outsourcing some of the stuff you hate or don't have the passion to do. Like, there are special people who have a passion for accounts receivable.
Right.
And they're awesome at it. And I bet there's probably some people at that company who that's what they specialize in. And they do a great job at it because they are passionate about it, as opposed to the guy who just wants to go grind some gears and make a few bucks.
Right. The one message that I usually get from them, or what I hear, I really love is, look, can you become a millionaire, running a trucking company and growing it? Yeah, you could, but it takes a lot of sacrifice, a lot of risk, right? There's a whole lot to it. And so they always say, do you want to be a fat cat or do you want to be a fed cat? We can keep you fed. And I think that's sometimes where the reality is, people are like, they're trying to chase that mountain, where guess what? The hill is perfect. It's not, it may not get you what you want, but it's getting you what you need. And what you need is that good constant flow. So now you have life, work balance, and that whole piece of it. I was like, you know what? Some of these millionaires are out there. I'd love to see those. You can see those life stories and the backstories of what they had to go through to get there.
You're already giving up a lot in this business when it comes to your family, your time, right? And that's just not even trying to go the route of multiple trucks and all that other stuff.
Right. So no, that's like I said, and man, these guys, like I said, once I've kept an eye on them for the longest time, and so they had asked me like, hey, can you help us? I had spent some time in the telematics space, obviously, and so I kind of knew, some ins and outs as to here's probably how you should position yourself, and so I had given them some insight, and so I always kind of like, all right, I'm going to keep an eye on you guys, so. If you get a chance, and they actually have some pretty funny TikToks and stuff. So, but Big Rig Fleet Services is kind of the guys that I'm kind of keeping an eye on and seeing where they go. But I like their aggregated approach to all these different services, and say, hey, look, we're not going to solve all your problems, but if you got one, or you want something that you don't want to handle, or you're struggling with, don't handle that one piece, right? And then they'll be there to kind of help with everything else that they need if needed, right? And so they're really focused on the small trucking companies, customer service, and how do we get them to grow. So that's where I would say that's another little project that I was kind of, man, that's great. But either way, in both aspects of what I'm doing today at CE Machines and kind of what I'm watching these guys do over a Big Rig, I become really passionate about it, because at the end of the day, once I realize it all just comes full circle as to what I'm here to do. And it's to help. It's to serve. It's to really to serve the community.
So you did go to college.
You know what? I always say, my the motto where I went to high school, it was Men for Others. I went to Dallas, and I went to Dallas Jesuit, and that was it. Their motto was Men for Others, and that's what they built, right? And so we're here to serve. We're here to serve others. And there's a little prayer that you basically kind of you say that. I know the prayer escapes me now, but at the end of the day, I'm going to find it now, because I'm going to get looked at. Yeah, it's teach me to be generous, teach me to serve as you deserve, to give and not to count the cost, to fight and not to heed the wounds, to labor and not to seek to rest, to give of myself and not to ask for reward. That was what the basis of kind of what the upbringing was, and honestly, where I wanted to go when I first got out of college was, all right, civil service. Well, I want to help serve my community. Of course, I blame my dad, where he said, don't stop doing anything. If someone offers you something, do it, right? And then the life experiences got. But then sure enough, when it came back to, okay, what's the one thing that I want to be able to do that I'm passionate about? I'm giving back, and I'm serving to a community that I've been involved in with the last 20 years in the transportation space. So that's where I'm like, okay, I found my footing. I have a service, or I have a solution that can help prevent accidents, like actively prevent accidents, right, with CE Machines. And then of course now with these guys, I'm helping I kind of helped advise them, and so I'm keeping an eye on them. So I'm like, yeah, I want to help you, right? So I'm donating my time in order to say, hey, look, this is how you can become successful in the telematics space. here are the different, providers out there. You talk about messaging and this and that. Whether it works or not, I don't know. I may not know everything, but I know a little bit about that space. And so I said, here's how you should at least try it to get into that space. And so, yeah, very much excited to kind of see where both of these kind of lanes go. But yeah,
and it's great fun to see good people working with good people, helping good people, serving good people, right? I mean, it's just, that makes it fulfilling.
Yeah.
For all the pains in the butts that come along in logistics, transportation, technology, all that stuff, at the end of the day, that's the thing that gives you a person energy, and kind of the iron sharpens iron
right
mindset too, of the people around you, seeing people who care, get up every morning and get after it. Gives you drive, right?
Yep.
And we just keep pushing each other.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to come on the podcast to see what you guys are doing. I may want to do it myself.
Well, it's a big thing. I'm gonna be honest, because I was, when I started, I was like, because I have a tendency to have about 800 ideas a day. 3 of them get started, 2.9 of them die within 3 days. And, so to still be sitting here working on episode 17, 18 weeks later is kind of, even my wife's like, she just thought I did it because I wanted to go buy fancy gadgets like microphones
Sure.
and lights and neon signs and shirts and stuff, and create memories and then move on to the next thing. Little did she know we'd still be doing this, but yeah.
Look, and any opportunity to kind of help, and like I said, I'd love to get some more people to come and talk to the audience, and hope you to get some sort of traction as to really, like I said, whoever's out there listening, if you need some support, obviously come to you and reach out. It's like, hey, who is that Yahoo talking about, managed services or whoever that is for dispatching stuff? I mean, that's what my hope is, right? That's why I'd love to come on and, hey, what about this driver fatigue thing? Like, what the heck is it, right? And that's, I hope.
Incremental, picking up pieces along the way. Like when I started my trucking company, I started as an owner-operator. And, then I was like, well, I'm going to buy more trucks because I was doing great, right? Little did I know I was going to be the most efficient worker that I had. And, just because you lose, my efficiency goes down when I hire that second driver, because now I have to take time invested into somebody else who's not the owner, right? The owner always works the hardest at things usually. And so, but of course my dad, my uncles, they're like, you're an idiot, don't buy another truck. We've done that before, it didn't work. And I'm like, well, that's because you're not me. If you were as amazing as me, it would have worked. Thank God I got here. You guys take it easy over there on the porch. I'll handle it from here.
Right.
And I learned a couple things. I took a couple tricks that they didn't know. Like, for example, I used a payroll service in a different state so I could get lower work comp. Right now, all my workers don't work for me. They work for TLC Payroll over in Goshen, Indiana, or someplace, right? So I knock, and when you're in trucking, right, and your margins are in the single digits, adding a couple digits is a significant move in the right direction, right? But my stupidity caught up with me, even though I found one little advantage, and it didn't all work out in the end. But I mean, incrementally, right? And that's the sort of stuff that you find for these people who are experts in their areas. To go, well, you can bang your head against the wall and chew up a whole bunch of your time and sacrifice your family life or your sanity, or you could find somebody who does a managed service and say, hey, can you handle this for me? You're good at it. Let me stick to what I'm good at, which is running trucks or whatever part of it you're good at.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the biggest thing too is with these guys over at Big Rig. I mean, they're offering this education. I mean, they're just giving the information away for free, right? They're educating on, hey, if you just want to learn about it, because once again, if you want to be able to get into this trucking, this trucking world, you can either go work for one of the big guys and get paid peanuts to start, or you can start, with your own truck, getting their insurance and getting your CDL and that whole piece of it. They want to help that one person say, all right, you just need one. Let's get you out on the road. and see if you can make you can make 6 figures. You can net 6 figures, in the first year if you're running pretty good under one truck. But
if you don't do it, a little bit of good luck and don't do anything dumb.
Right, that's exactly it. And then you maintain your truck, right? Preventative maintenance is huge. Knowing what to do and how to do it, right? And that's what they're going to help you. They're going to essentially spoon feed you the whole way and be like, hey, have you done this? Have you done that? That's some of the roles and some of the responsibilities that these account managers are saying, hey, where are you at? What's going on? I mean, that's their whole point, because to be quite honest, that's how they get paid, because that managed service is coming back every day, and that's what's running the business.
Well,
right?
A big part of it too is, and this was one of the things I've talked about in a number of episodes that crippled me, was most of the time, okay, most of us who got into trucking got behind the wheel. The vast majority of us were not A students. And also, we didn't go get finance degrees and things like that before we ended up behind the wheel. But that doesn't make us bad business people. It makes us under-knowledged in certain areas that are going to become important, like when you buy that truck, because you're chasing down, right? You just mentioned it. I got to worry about maintenance on this truck. I got to worry about where I'm going to find loads. Is this a good deal? And usually one of the things that catches up with you is you don't know finance, and you don't know how to look at the numbers appropriately to figure out, how come I'm not making as much money as I thought I would?
Right.
Or it feels like I'm working my ass off here, but at the end of the day, I'm still broke. Right. But once again, another aspect of the service is financial, actually doing your books appropriately, right? I'll never forget the day, because this is basically the day I went bankrupt. I didn't go bankrupt officially, but that was the final straw that broke the camel's back. Was I walked into my banker's office. I had 30 trucks at the time, 30 some trailers, and I had done my country math, and I knew well enough to go, I don't think if I send these guys out on the road, I'm going to end up having the money to pay them for their payroll in like 3 weeks. And I drove up to Minnesota. My main banker was in Minnesota. I was down in Rochelle, Illinois at the time. And I walk into his office, and I hand him my country math of how I'm managing my business. And he looked at my country math, and he said, there's not a prayer in hell I'm going to give you $75,000 to keep this thing running. And I mean, this is all I'd done, right? From 19 years old until sitting here in 2002. So I was, 25 years old. Every moment of every day, every dollar of everything, my pickup truck, my used boat, like the chemicals under the sink, like it was all signed on the note. Like, you get it all, Mr. Banker Man. I'm all in on this. And I didn't know how to talk to a banker because I didn't know finance. And he said no. And I said, you know what that means? And he's like, yep. And okay, well, I guess you're going to get some keys in the mail in about 10 days once I round them all up. Because it's over. Because I'm not going to send guys out on the road that I know I can't pay. And so, but things like that, right? Like, but the thing I'm most regretful about is what he didn't say to me was, son, and even before, because he loaned me money. I mean, I had 30 trucks, right? Even though I didn't buy a lot of new equipment, but still 30 trucks at 50 grand each is $1.5 million. 30 trailers at 30 grand each is another, 2-point-some million dollars worth of equipment. Like, he had to have known I wasn't doing very well at accounting up until then. But what I needed was somebody to look at the books and go, or to offer a class. We didn't have YouTube back then.
Right.
We didn't have any of these other things. So, no one was going to come knocking on my door going, hey, there's no door-to-door accountants. They'd probably get punched. But so
let's be real; those accountants are all introverts anyway. They're not
right,
gonna come out.
You're not knocking on anybody's door. I might throw a rock through your window with a note around it. So anyway, it's like valuable things that keep you out of trouble and keep you on an upward trajectory, because guys are busting their asses out there. I've watched great truckers walk away because they just didn't know some of these things, and who were they going to ask?
Right.
You know.
And that's, the beauty of it too, is also knowing when you overextend yourself. And that's what these guys will do. They'll look at they're doing quarterly business reviews with these, owner operators, these company owners, where they're like, hey, you know what? Don't buy this truck. You probably need to sell some of these trailers, right? Or you need to sell some of these trucks, or you need to reduce or get rid of some of these drivers, because these drivers are costing you in the long run. If you want to hire somebody else and replace this guy, or let him go and sell that truck and downsize a little bit, so that, because here's the trajectory, here's the trends that are happening, and they can show it to you, right? And so now all of a sudden you're getting educated as to how am I more of a businessman as opposed to driving a truck, right? And so that's, once again, to be able to, that's a valuable lesson or education that no matter how well you did in school, you're going to learn and be like, okay, this makes sense to me, right? As long as you look at it some way different, right? And
yeah, you need somebody to share that knowledge with you. And it's also a bit of a sixth sense.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately for me and a lot of guys, we found out we got that sixth sense because we went broke. And then we spent the next 5 years of our life examining what the hell happened. Because, like, no human being could have worked harder than I worked during that period.
Right.
I ate damaged freight. I, wake up at 3 a.m, go to bed at midnight. Anything to stay ahead, because it was all I had, and it wasn't enough. No, it wasn't enough, because I didn't have the knowledge to work smarter, and I was just trying to work harder.
Yep. Yeah. No. Like I said, there's beauty in like I said, in the organizations that have really kind of reignited my passion for what I'm doing. And like I said, it's really to serve and to help educate, right? And the funny thing too is everybody that's an expert is going to be professional, and they're going to be successful in what they do and what they say. If you can't be a professional, then you go and you teach, right? That's exactly what it is. You're going to be a coach.
Those who can do, those who can't teach.
Right. That's exactly it. And I always tell those guys over there, I'm like, so were you really successful, or you just really suck, and and you're just really doing? But no, truly they did well, and they essentially sold off a portion of their business because guess what? Somebody offered them a lot of money and say, hey, I want to take this lane from you, this agricultural stuff, and so they essentially started selling off, and they're like, okay, we made a pretty good amount of money. How can we start to give back to the community? How can we start to give back to the people that we want to grow? And they recognize that this is a neglected market, like I said in the beginning, right? And sure enough, when I talk to them, I always kind of mention to them, it's like, look, you have some really good resources and you guys talked about the language side of it, but down on the border, there's trucking companies popping up every day. And a lot of them go out of business really quickly because, once again, they lack the education of it. And so, there's a big push down there to help educate or take over some of those managed services for these trucking companies down on the border because, look, they got the capital, they have the lanes, there's so much freight. There is, I think, Laredo is the largest land port in the United States, and there is so much freight coming in and out of there. So warehouses are popping up like crazy for, customs, and you name it. So now all of a sudden these warehouse people are like, yeah, I'll just go buy some trucks and move it, right? And so now they're offering door-to-door service from these Mexican companies or something that are actually moving freight into the United States. They warehouse it for them, and they're like, oh, we'll just do it door-to-door. Yeah. And so now all of a sudden they're like, okay, how do we leverage this? No experience in the trucking side, but they do know how to have a relationship with these Mexican shippers there, and then they're having their freight in our warehousing in there in Laredo, and now they're just trying, okay, I can either make money brokering it out, or I can keep the majority of it, charge at a really good rate, and still move it for us, move it here. And so, like I said, that's where they started, I kind of pushed them that direction. They're going to take a look at it, and sure enough, that's where they're looking to grow that piece of it there, and they're actually starting to get a little traction down there. But fortunately for them, they're hiring some people that speak Spanish. So that's where a lot of this stuff is, they have all their training materials, and they have their customer service people and that speak Spanish. Not so much for the drivers, but more for the business owners that are down there. So yeah, it's really cool to kind of see it happen. And so, like I said, that's shout out to those guys. Hopefully they do well, because like I said, I'm kind of keeping an eye on them and see how they turn out, because like I said, I think they're doing something really good down there.
Cool. Well, brother, you set the bar high. Nobody's driven all the way to come meet me and be on the podcast before. So, let that be the standard for everybody. I live on the west side of Phoenix. Get your butts down there. I just got, the pool is a nice warm temperature. It's 110 degrees in Phoenix.
Yeah, it's like
just about right.
Like lukewarm bath water. It's beautiful.
It's about 87 degrees. But yeah, awesome for you to come up here, you both to come visit, and thank you, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I was like, anything to not have a disconnected service or anything. Plus it was a good excuse to come see you, right? So I can write it off. No, I'm just kidding. No,
I went to England to write it off,
Oh, that's right. That's
so
right.
A truck show in England.
That's fine. I like that. No, it's like I said, you mentioned earlier about being prepared. I thought I'd be prepared, but at the end of the day, it was just more off the cuff, and it's really fun just talking through that with you, and I really enjoyed it. And I thought it would be better just in person. Maybe it's just the sales guy in me. I like to be able to see somebody across this table and be able to connect that way. So I know if you're not just flicking me off when I say something weird. So
sorry, my camera.
Yeah. No, man, but I appreciate it. Thank you. I appreciate the hospitality, and hopefully, like I said, I hope everything works out with this. And like I said, I'm gonna promote the crap out of you guys here too to kind of get some more people, more subscribers. But man, if there's a topic, I'd love to connect you with other people in the industry to be like, hey, you know what? We want to, take a poll. Hey, what's something else that intrigues you that you want to be able to learn a little bit more? And man, I'd love to kind of help you grow your stuff as well.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. And that's what that's why, at the end of the day, okay, yes, there were the conversations about the podcast that were like, okay, we're just going to tell jokes and talk about memes, right? And make fun of Cowboys fans. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds like fun. Let's do a podcast about that. And, but that only gives you so much energy. Right?
Yeah.
Like, there's only so many cowboy jokes I can tell and still get excited about it. Because then they'll go back on the field and, it's like, well, we can't pick on the special kids.
Wow. Shots fired again. God, it's like taking 2 shots at him.
But the whole thing, just like you talked about, the thing that gives me energy and the people around who are helping me do all this all the time and guests is service.
Yeah.
It's about sharing knowledge, sharing stories, finding ways to connect people, and that's why I tell people, if you got a question, if you're stumped, I don't know everything. I can tell you the wrong way to do a lot of things. And luckily enough, I've learned now over 30-some years in this business to find some people who actually know what they're doing, and let's connect you with them.
Right.
But that's really what it's
It's very much like parenting. I can tell my kids the same thing over and over again of what not to do, and they don't listen. But they have somebody else tell them, oh man, that's a great idea. I'm going to do that.
Sometimes it's just the day.
Yeah.
Right? Verlin and I were talking last night, and we were just telling some other trucker stories, and I said, there was a lesson the other day that just hit me for the first time. And I'm like, my uncle told me that when I was 17 years old, and I'm 48. And now I want to go ask him, but he's gone now. Hey, uncle, I finally know what you meant. Now I need to know what was the rest of the story, because I got the point.
Oh.
And so that's why we share these stories,
Yeah.
right? I share this information, and maybe it's the day you need to hear something and get a tip and point it in the right direction.
Just the tip, though.
Just the tip. And then, but maybe you're going to listen to this, or you're going to remember it, 2 years from now, and go, some dumbasses on the radio from Dallas, and what they told me about a company that could help. It's even if it just gets you searching in the right direction of looking for help and not thinking that you're on an island,
Right.
then that's help in and of itself. Right? So
I agree.
thanks, brother.
Yeah, man.
Appreciate you.
Appreciate it.
TrueTMS is a cloud-based transportation management system. Being in the cloud makes integrations faster, and you're able to access the platform from anywhere. It has intuitive planning, on-demand reporting, and easy order creation, rating, and invoices, which turns tedious admin work into streamlined, automated workflows. The folks at TrueTMS have decades of trucking and liquid experience, and they care about this industry. They don't just sell you a product, they're invested in your success. Visit their website, truetms.com, and of course, tell them Channel 19 sent you.
More than anything, this show's about bringing back the sense of community we used to find on the CB, especially good old Channel 19. No rants, no corporate spin, just long-form storytelling from someone who's been behind the wheel, built the fleet, hit rock bottom, and climbed right back up.
Welcome back. Let's kick it back up to line 3 and hammer out the money line quick this week. I could also consider this a bulletin board item, I guess, because it did happen on social media. I got myself wrangled into a bit of a debate on Facebook this week. 99% of the time, I avoid these things like the plague. I'm good at typing up my message that would start a debate and then just deleting and going, what the hell do I really care this much to get into this about anyway? But every once in a while, I hit send before I hit delete and I get drug in. So it started innocently enough. It was on Swift's Facebook page. They had made a post about an owner-operator named Henry. Henry had just paid off his truck with Swift. It didn't say whether he was a lease purchase or they sold him the truck and had a loan on it. There was no details behind it. They just said that congratulations to owner-operator Henry for paying off his truck. And so I hopped in the comments, like I usually do, to say some congratulations. I like to share an encouraging word to anyone on their accomplishments, paying off a truck, work anniversaries, million mile, multiple million mile, safe driving, any of that stuff that commemorates achievements that we all know are difficult and take sacrifice and dedication and all the things that we take pride in as truck drivers. But what I did after I put my comment, I made the mistake of scrolling through the comments. And let's face it, Swift gets more than their fair share of negative comments in general, whether it's out in the other trucking groups or even on their own social media pages. So there were some negative comments in the post. Questions like, or comments like, does he speak English? And kudos for Swift on that one for not just letting it pass and responding in a funny but to the point way, which was, well, we interviewed him in English and the quotes in our post are in English. So yeah, I think he speaks English. But the one that got me wrangled into the debate was there were a couple of comments attempting to correct Swift's post, which was Swift had categorized in the post that Henry was an owner-operator. And the commenters were stating essentially that he's a leased operator and not an owner-operator. And I may have jumped the gun a little bit, assuming that it was meant to be a slight of some sort. There's always the possibility it wasn't, but I've been around this trucking game a long time. And this thing is not new. It's been around at least for my 30 years plus in trucking. The debate about what the real trucker is or what is a real owner-operator. And probably the part that irked me out of the gate was that those comments were coming on a congratulatory post for Henry. And I suppose I'm partly to blame. I could have just let it go. But I proceeded to ask some questions to see what the other commenters may have meant by owner-operator. There wasn't a ton of detail in the post other than they called Henry an owner-operator and that he had paid off his truck. It didn't say that Henry made it through some lease purchase program or some other kind of program. Just that he's now an owner-operator. So I was like, well, how would you even know such a thing? And where is your boundary of owner-operator that makes you make a comment like that? So I proceeded to ask some questions to see what they meant. And then they started laying out some criteria, things like, in order to be an owner-operator, and I'm paraphrasing here, these aren't direct quotes, but the general theme was, like, you're not an owner-operator if you don't run your own plates, if you're not under your own authority, if you don't find your own freight, and so on. And so, of course, I chirped back. Does that actually include owning the truck? I mean, if you want to be an owner-operator and put all these criteria around it, the bank owning the truck and you borrowing it from them for a monthly fee because you can't sell it without their permission maybe doesn't qualify some other people as owner-operators either, considering there's not a hell of a lot of people who own trucks outright in this business, especially with how expensive they are. Which I didn't get any response to that. No surprise. And as most Facebook conversations go, it kind of went down the usual path. Obviously, I must be an idiot, don't know anything about trucking, and also I must be a wannabe owner-operator and just the leased operator too. So no surprise that we ended up there. And kind of it was revealing because I tried to go down the path of, well, maybe I'm the idiot for assuming that what they meant was some sort of slight against Swift calling him an owner operator or him thinking himself an owner operator, and that's the big leagues, and you're just a leased operator, not one of the big leaguers. So I guess kind of by the time we got to the insults and other things at the end of the post, and basically calling me just the least operator, I guess I was kind of on point in my original assumptions after all. But it did get me thinking about what is an owner operator. It's long been kind of a nebulous concept, right? The boundaries of it are loose, and depending on who you ask on what day, you may get different answers. I went to the internet to see what the internet might tell me. Not that that's going to provide a ton of clarity most of the time. But anyway, I got into some things like OOIDA polls and ATRI numbers and transport topic numbers, Landline Magazine, all kinds of different things where it's not entirely clear what they mean by owner operator, but you have to believe based on the numbers of how many hundreds of thousands of owner operators they claim are out there participating in the trucking industry that their definition must be a lot looser than have their own authority, find their own freight, all those other things. So I didn't come to any conclusion here in all this. I just wanted to share with you all my little debate that I managed to wind myself into, and also that it relates to a couple of the topics here that we have on the podcast, right? We just listened to Eric and we talked a little bit about the big rig fleet service and the services that they provide. And other carriers out there, Swift talking about this post, but there's different parts of the spectrum of how independent is. You've got the Landstars of the world and their BCO model. You've got the Admiral Merchants and some of these other ones that are like you're self-sufficient on many parts of it, of being an owner operator. And then you have other carriers, the Swifts and the Schneiders and the JB Hunts and these big carriers that provide a bunch of services for their contractors and their various models. Some of it's included, some of it's a value-added service that you pay for. But then also I've talked to some people who are owner operators who work for smaller companies that they facilitate either purchasing the base plates or a variety of these things that you could do for yourself. But if they're already doing them for themselves or others, they're pretty efficient at doing it for you. So just like big rig fleet services, there's people out there who know how to do this stuff. They can do it really fast because they do it a lot, and it takes some things off your plate. Like I've said many times, there's 1,000 ways to do this thing called trucking. And a lot of it is about figuring out what's going to work for you. What do you value doing yourself, and what makes sense to outsource? For example, I didn't fix my own engine and rear ends that pooped the bed. I called an actual mechanic. Does that mean I wasn't an owner operator because I didn't turn every wrench that touched my truck? I've had my own plates. I mean, I always ran my own plates, mostly for a reason that I never really had to utilize, which was I just wanted to be able to pick up and leave if I wanted to at a moment's notice, and I didn't want to have to wait around to either to get another plate at some new company I was working with, and I just wanted to carry my own and have mine and will travel. And then at certain points, I did operate finding my own loads and running my own authority. But also, I know plenty of times where, boy, if somebody would have offered me at a rate to go deal with the headache of plating my trucks, especially back then when it was a lot of paperwork and not a lot of digital, you betcha I would have taken you up on that in a heartbeat to outsource that to somebody. Does that mean I wasn't an owner operator? I don't know. It all seems kind of silly, a little bit arbitrary. Or here's one that came to mind was, if you air quotes find your own freight by going to a load board, did you really find your own freight? Or did the broker find the freight and you just got it from them? So once again, rather nebulous boundaries and arbitrary it seems. And the point really isn't about the debate. There's probably no point to the debate, just like a lot of trucker debates. And I got myself wrapped in, so shame on me for that. But it also ties in to the next guest, Mike Ritzema. And we're talking about per diem, another area that requires some specific understanding of how it works, how to do it appropriately, not get yourself in trouble. So this is where expertise matters, and paying somebody to help you utilize their expertise so you don't have to invest the time in it and you can put your time towards something that makes you money, it just makes sense, regardless of what anybody wants to call it. So take advantage of experts and shortcuts that other people have found or can do more efficiently than you can. Time is one of your assets, and it's one of your pillars of your wealth, and you can't recover it once you've lost it. And finally, before we jump into the interview with Mike, congratulations once again to Henry. He paid off his truck with Swift in 3 years, during one of the tougher 3 year stretches that we've seen in this business for quite a while. With all the talk about how buying a truck is a fool's errand these days, and how people can't be successful at these big fleets, also how purchasing trucks through these big fleets is proclaimed as predatory in nature and unfair. Whatever the program was that Henry made it in 3 years to having a paid off truck, anyone who actually knows trucking recognizes that that's a hell of an accomplishment. It took sacrifice, making tough choices, probably a little bit of good luck and good fortune in there, just like all of us know. That's what plays into some of the success in this business. But we know for sure it took long hours, it took dedication, it took sacrifice, and in part by his family too. So congratulations, Henry. Let's take a quick detour to line four, and then we'll get into the discussion with Mike Ritzema, Superior Trucking Payroll Services. I'll see you on the flip side with the post trip. This week, we've got, I think, probably my first returning guest, Mike Ritzema, Superior Trucking Payroll Service.
Excellent.
Two in
Yes.
a row. Yes, I got it.
The name and the company both done well.
I'm trainable. I'm coachable. So Mike's back. Last time we were together, we talked about 1099s and all the fun nuances around 1099s and what's real, what's fiction, and how you should be thinking about that, whether you're on the driver's side of it or on the employer side of it. And so this week we wanted to talk about per diem and the another kind of nebulous area in people's minds that hopefully we can provide a little clarity around. I'm an old guy. Um, and when I started and kind of up until the end of my truck driving career, per diem was something that you just basically took whatever the base rate was from the IRS, like $50, $55. I can't remember what it ended at. And you looked through your logbook and counted up how many days you were not at home, and you got your total number of days. Let's call it 250, 300. And then you got, I believe, some kind of percentage. Like you could take 75% of the $55 and times however many days, and that was your deduction. But times have changed. And so it's a different sort of animal right now. So that's why we wanted to talk with Mike and kind of get the lowdown on the realities and myths of per diem. Welcome back.
Yeah, thanks. I'm excited to be here. This is my very favorite topic that I ever get to talk about. And I get excited because we can change lives with this. I'm telling you, for the drivers and for the owners, for everybody. This is such a big thing. And I'm always shocked that people don't know about it, but that's just because it's native to me. But it's okay. Now this is how we learn. And so, we can change somebody's life today, just in the next 20, 30 minutes, whatever it's going to be.
And not
So
even just like let's say a small fleet or even a large fleet, right? But even the guy who's in one single truck owner operator who's paying himself through an S Corp or something like that, this has an impact for them too.
Anybody who gets a W-2 gets it. The 1099 people are still the same way that they were. It's 80%. You were really close on the percentage. It's 80% deductible. And it's now up to $80 a day. So it's gone up quite a bit. It went up from 69 to 80 last October. So yeah, the 1099 people stayed the same, the people that are the legit owner operators. But one of the things you talked about is how it's changed since you were in a truck. When the big tax law change happened in 2017, 2018, they took away that deduction. And so they increased the standard deduction. They did a whole lot of things, but that deduction went away and it was a big deal. And so now but you can still get it if your trucking company pays it to you. If the person who issues you the W-2 runs it through the paycheck or something like that, then you still get the money tax free. And that's the big win.
Awesome. So how does it work? Like, what's the setup? Like, if I'm a driver and someone is coming at me with, say, hey, here's here's how we do payroll here. It has a per diem. It's not the same way as if you were working for another fleet that doesn't do the per diem. What does that look like, and what does that really mean to the driver?
Well, the process is, in a nutshell, that let's make up a hypothetical paycheck here just to put numbers behind it. A driver is getting 50 cents a mile and they drove 2,500 miles because it's easy math, so that's good for me. $1,250. And without per diem, you would just tax it from there, take out the FICA, federal income tax, state income tax, get to a net, all the other deductions, whatever that you got to
Yeah.
do. With per diem, if this driver was gone 5 days, if they were on the road 5 days, then instead of paying them $1,250 in wage, they're basically going to get paid $850 in wage and $400 in reimbursement for meals and incidentals. So what that does is you don't get taxed on that $400. And that's the highest tax bracket you're going to have for the IRS. If your state is in what I would call a progressive tax bracket system, where the more you earn, the higher percentage you pay, you're also lopping off the highest part of that one, and you're not paying the Social Security and Medicare on it.
So the driver's not paying the Social Security on it and all the other those standard deductions that come out of, not to mix terms here, but the other typical deductions that you see in your paycheck for unemployment and all those other things, you wouldn't see that on the $400 portion. You would see it on the 850.
Yes,
Also, on the employer side, they would not see their half of those shared expenses, essentially, of matching the Social Security and things like that.
absolutely correct. That the employer would not have to pay the Social Security, and they wouldn't have to pay workers' comp insurance on it. So
Hmm.
that's for the real win for them. Workers' comp insurance, as a broad generalization, and there are crazy wild rates both ways. I like to use 8.5% as an average. And
Yeah.
so you've got for the payroll tax side on the employer, I don't ever count the unemployments because I figure you're going to run those up anyway. They're usually on a limited wage base. So
Hmm.
in Michigan, it's $9,000. So the driver's going to make over 9,000 net of per diem anyway. But just if you just use the FICA tax, that's 7.65%, and then the uh, workers' comp is another 8.5%. Again, about your mileage may vary on that, but you're looking at over 16% that you can save
Yeah.
on that $400. That's $64 at 16% flat. You pay a little bit, a hair more in income tax. I roll through all the details on my website, but that I don't know. We need to go into it, but they're going to save $35 easily per driver per week. Just for the trucking company, the driver themselves, their paycheck's going to be $100 bigger.
Right.
That's the biggest raise they ever get. So imagine drivers, imagine what you do if you had an extra $100 in your check every week.
Yeah.
Like,
Same job, same everything else. But
same
there is
everything
one
else.
difference, right?
There are
On
differences,
yeah.
absolutely. Um, one of them is because you're paying less into Social Security, you will get less when you retire from Social Security. That I always point that out because this isn't a magic elixir in the sense of it's cure all and no pain at all. You will have that. My advice is get with an investment person. Even if you put away a quarter of the savings as a driver, you'd come out ahead.
Yeah.
That's the big thing. But it's still but $25 away for retirement, $75 a week for you to keep. I mean, that's just on the $75. If we put away that 25%, $3,900 a year. It's a
Right.
lot of dough.
It
So
is.
that's what makes me so excited is truck drivers all over the country work crazy hard and work crazy hours. You just do. I could never do it. I don't know how you guys do it, but you do. And so if I can make their lives a little bit better, and I think $4,000 a year makes their lives quite a bit better,
Yeah.
I love it. And the fact that the trucking company also makes a little bit in it, they'll make 15 to $1,800 a year back on average. It's just such a win.
Yeah. But I mean, we're in a business of single digit margins, right? So
If
every little bit helps.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also shows too, as an employer, you're showing that you want to give your drivers as much as you can. You want them to have the financial success that you'd want them to have. Look, we're going to pay you per diem. It should be in your, I'm going to say this slowly and clearly for the audience. If you pay per diem, it needs to be in your driver ad. The drivers that want it will know it and they will understand it and they will come see you for it. I talk to lots of people all over the country and they don't even put it in their ad. And I'm like, you guys are killing me, man. Why are you not telling the driver about $100 a week they're going to get?
Yeah, and but also what comes with that is being armed with the explanation of how it
Mhm.
works because truck drivers, we've been on the receiving end of all kinds of complicated, cooked up schemes of driver pay and every other thing that looks great on the surface. And then 3 months in, or when your tax man gets a hold of it, you find out, yeah, that was not a good idea. You should have came and asked me first. But this is a
Oh,
legitimate program.
yes, absolutely. On our website, truckingpayroll.com, we've got a whole page dedicated to per diem. It's they call it a landing page, and we talk about it all the time. And we've even got an article that links to the IRS regs about it. They're called revenue procedures. They usually cite the one from the year before, but it goes back and you can get to the original one very quickly, and it'll talks all about it. We also have some article. We have a ton of articles on there. Things like if you're a trucking company, how can you roll this out? Because rolling it out is the key if you're not paying it now.
Yeah.
Because as you had just mentioned, drivers have heard what we will call dubious pay schemes before, and they've been burned by them. I will go back to what I say to everyone is if you ever want to have a driver talk to you for 45 minutes, just ask them how their former company stuck it to them and then
Yeah.
buckle up because they're just gonna, and you're gonna have real stories.
Yep.
So this is not one of those. And so and I see that on socials. I'll have drivers, I'll post an article on LinkedIn and or on TikTok and someone will comment on it, go, oh, that's a big scam. It's all illegal and all that kind of stuff. Probably because they got stuck by somebody
Mhm.
on something. And I'm like, it's really not. And I'll try and talk to them because I'm so glad they're reaching out. I'm just so glad that the driver's engaged and I get the chance to try and make their life better. And even if they end up not disagreeing with me, at least I want them to see that someone can talk to them and acknowledge what they're saying. And it's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, circling back to your comment about how it does impact your Security contribution, which will ultimately end up impacting whatever that payout is down the road,
Hopefully.
if assuming there's a payout.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Um, but I mean, that's true of everything you would do to reduce your tax bill, right? Like if you're an owner operator and you buy a new bumper and you expense that bumper and it reduces your overall tax liability, the point was to reduce your tax bill. All of those acts also reduce your eventual payout in Social Security. So it's not any different than any other deduction you take, whether your standard deduction or any of that. All that stuff
Mhm.
plays into Social Security contributions that you make today, which affects payouts later on when you're at retirement age.
Yeah, absolutely. If you were an owner operator your whole career and you figured out a way to never show a profit, I don't want to know how you did it, but let's just say you did. Your Social Security check's going to be zero. That's the easiest math there ever is. You weren't in the system.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you do have to pay in to get out, but at the same time, if you know that your Social Security will be usually per diem is about 25% of the wage neighborhood of maybe up to a third, even 40%, depending on the situation. But just know that your Social Security would, if you did it your whole entire career, beginning to end, it would be 25% less. But if you're putting away that money that I was talking about in the beginning, with just put it into an IRA, do whatever, a financial tool, and they're readily available. You're going to come out so far ahead, and that's also
Yeah.
going to be real money versus if you're in the 20. I would love to see a poll right now of 20-year-olds and how many think they're going to collect Social Security, and it's probably really low. So, or the retirement age will be like 106. So,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, right? Even if you just take a portion, put it towards some IRA, some, managed mutual fund, something like that.
yes,
It's your money, it's in your account. It's not subject to politicians' whims as to how they bankrupt the Social Security trust fund or lack thereof. Um, and it's an asset on your books, right?
yeah, and it's going to be there. Yeah, like
Right.
that's the amazing thing of it. Now I know that a lot of people won't actually take the advice of investing the money, and their Social Security will be less, but you should have saved up more money. You're gonna have the extra $100 a week. You can save up. You can find out. You don't have to do it through an IRA. I mean, you should do it through an IRA, but you wouldn't have to. You could do it just having money in your piggy bank. Uh, you know,
Yeah.
just grow your piggy bank and just be aware of it. Awareness is the key. And my experience has been with a lot of trucking companies, especially small ones, is that they are so cash sensitive that the extra $100 a day if they were a driver, or the extra, you know, a few, $1,500 to $2,000 a year for each driver that you employ, that you're going to get that money now, and that's going to be more
Yeah.
important to you anyway.
Yeah,
And
for on
so,
the business side, it's reducing your payroll expense that immediate week, right? The week you start, you're going to save money. This isn't some scheme you
yep,
gotta wait till you file taxes or anything else. Like the savings is immediate. And
you
the
get it.
impact to your drivers is immediate on the next payroll you run.
Yep, you get it today. The insurance savings comes out in your audit or when you renew because you're going to have lower wage.
Hmm.
But either way is good. Historically, a lot of people that use traditional work comp tend to underestimate their payroll so they can put less of a deposit. Well, this might actually make it be accurate, so that would be good too. Yeah, so that would be nice. And even you were talking before about when you did per diem on your taxes. In a lot of places that helped, but it wasn't nearly as much help as what like paying it through the trucking company. So if they have, because there's all these tax laws that are going to change this year. That's all the tax cuts from the one we're talking about from 2017, 2018, TJCA, I think is what the acronym was for it. Um, those all expire, so they're going to have to renew them, and they're going to throw in some changes on different things. So if they
Sure.
decided to lower the standard deduction and make unreimbursed employee expenses, which is what that was, redeductible, you still were paying FICA on it all, Social Security. And for a lot of states don't itemize. I'm in Michigan, they don't itemize here, so you weren't getting those back. But now, because per diem is before we even get to taxing, you're getting the deduction there that you wouldn't get if you took it yourself, even if you could.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key points too to walk away from as a driver. There's no other way to take advantage of this unless your employer is doing it this way, right? You can't, there's the old way is gone. You can't itemize because even a company driver back in the day,
Hmm.
they could utilize this deduction, but now you cannot in that method. You have to, your employer has to do it. So when you're looking at comparing apples to apples from a payroll, if one company's saying they're paying you 50 cents a mile and they don't do per diem, that is not going to be the same outcome on your paycheck as going to somebody who pays 50 cents per mile and does per diem, right? The bottom
Yeah,
line is going to be different.
$100
Yep.
different. Yep, absolutely. And I know a lot of the cognitive disconnect or whatever, I don't know the neurology phrasing, but is that the idea that the trucking company and the drivers are oppositional forces as far as money goes. Money given to drivers is money taken away from the company. Money taken from drivers is money given to the company. Well, this isn't the case with per diem. They both get money. The money comes from the IRS and the insurance agency, neither of
Yep.
whom we're that really worried about as far as priorities. We'd rather have the company succeed and the drivers succeed. So some people might be like, well, how can we both win? That just seems to not work. And that's why they might think it's a scam. And
Yep.
no, you guys win, the IRS loses most of it, and then the insurance carrier loses on their work comp premium. We're okay with
Yep.
that.
Yeah. Nobody's crying over those agencies.
They'll stay open.
Yeah. All right. So when you're thinking about this as you're a small fleet, I mean, we covered some of the topics. Is there anything else to consider as far as if you're a small fleet? You talked a little bit about just kind of the change management of it. Like, don't just spring this on your fleet and go, hey, guys, by the way, next paycheck we're doing per diem. That's not a good way to inform people that you're doing something like this because there's going to be questions.
No, I agree. Drivers are generally skeptical because of the experiences they've had. And I understand why they would be skeptical. And so you want to roll it out right. I would advise rolling it out as soon as you can. Don't wait till the end of the year. Do it now. Start saving that money now. Start giving that money to the drivers in their paycheck now. And then the next thing I would do is I would meet with all my drivers as much as I could do it feasibly. I understand your drivers may be all over the country. It might be one-on-one conversations. It might be something the next time they're in, because it's better if it's in person. And then the real trick is say, here's your current paycheck right now, this week, 2,500 miles, 50 cents a mile. Here's the check we want to switch you to that has per diem in it, and it's $100 more at the bottom line. Which check do you want?
Yeah.
Which one would you rather have? And if they're gonna pick the probably the bigger check. I mean, unless they're against their own self-interest, they're gonna pick the bigger check. And so that's the way I would roll it out to them, would be, look, this is, you can literally take their check. We've done this for people where, especially for clients of ours, we'll give them a check with and without per diem and show them and say, look, we'll highlight the difference for them. Here's where it's going. Here's the differences and here's the math and here's where you end up. So,
Yeah, or even put together some, an information packet about
mhm,
like here's your last four paychecks. Like not just
mhm,
do a one spot, but here's your last four checks. Here's a month's worth of difference for you, and also be able to do, or even maybe go year to date and go, if we continue on, let's just say the first 6 months, because we're almost to the midpoint of the year here. If we do what we did January through June for the rest of the year, here's what we're going, what would have paid you. And I mean, every one of these business should have an accountant, a tax preparer.
mhm.
Get that person in there to show them if you're just doing a standard filing, 1040, doing your taxes that way as a driver, here's the difference that it would be, and be able to talk through all the things we just talked about, right? And give that information to them, and don't try to shove it down there. Don't try to convince them in the moment. As a former truck driver, like I got to drive around a little bit. I'm gonna need a couple hundred miles to digest this and think about, work through what
Talk to
my
my
objections
friends.
are. Yeah, make some phone
Uh-huh.
calls, phone a friend, phone my wife, phone a tax guy, my
Yep.
tax guy, and go, is this guy blowing smoke here? Or is this like, are we all going to jail for this later? And that, like give them an opportunity to work through it and ask questions in a way that a driver would.
Yep.
And
Absolutely. The driver should see this. They won't see it as a good thing necessarily right away because almost every change that every trucking company drops on them is unfavorable to the driver.
yeah.
And so this is one where it's not. And so we want to explain it. We want to walk them through it. Uh, yeah, I would, and one thing the other point I would absolutely tell people is if you have a driver that is dead set against this, they don't care about the math. They don't care about anything. They're just convinced that it's a horrible idea because someone told them, whatever.
Yeah.
Just let them opt out. Just don't have them have any per diem days. And so that's, you don't want to lose a good driver over this.
So
Right? Good drivers are hard to find.
absolutely. Yeah, you don't want to die on that hill with a good
Mm-mm.
driver. I was going to ask you because you see this a lot dealing with the fleets and their payroll.
Mhm.
Like things like 34-hour restarts, or like how are they tabulating the days for
Yeah,
that time period?
that's a great question. It's really easy. When did you leave? Okay, I'm going to make the assumption here you have a company that has one terminal and the trucks all go in and basically in and out of there.
Hmm.
So it's not somebody like Schneider who's got terminals all over the country or
Yeah.
something like that. Um, yeah, when did they leave? So they left today to go. I'm in Michigan. They left today to go to California. They deliver out in California on Tuesday. They do their 34-hour reset, reload Thursday morning, get back here Sunday. Well, let's see, today's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They got 10 days per diem. It's from when they leave to when they get back.
Okay. So no matter what happens in
Yeah,
between.
if they have a breakdown, if they get because it's meals and incidentals while you're on the road and you're still on the road.
Yep.
And so it's you get all of that. And so yeah, you can't, I will tell you too, just as a quick thing to watch out for, you can't claim 365 days on the road a year. There's some of you that probably work that. The IRS would then tell you that your home was the truck and you were home every night. It's
That's a good
happened.
got you to know.
Yeah. I tell people, yeah, once you more than I mean, I'm not saying you can't have a week with 7 days when you're out because that absolutely happens. I
Yep.
mean, if you're going from Maine to San Diego, right? Like you're going to do the round trip before you turn in your bills, you're absolutely going to have
Oh, yeah,
seven
we got
days per
plenty
diem
of
per week.
listeners who are gone for months at a time.
Yeah, right. And so you're going to have those. Just be home for a while. Because it's going to end up, it shows up on your W-2, but not in a way that's taxable. It's in what's called box 12, like where they put your 401k and all that stuff and your
Hmm.
health insurance if you're an ALE, applicable large employer. But yeah, you absolutely have to do that. And the trick to actually implementing this as a trucking company is you figure out their wage, you subtract out the per diem, you tax them out, and then you add it back in. We do that automatically for people. If you're using, I'm just going to use QuickBooks as an example, you're going to have to do it manually. And you're going to have to make sure you do both sides. And it's tricky because none of those guys are built for that, which is fine because they take care of donut shops and doctors' offices and all that too.
Sure.
Yeah. But it can be done and it can save you a lot of money and it's worth looking into.
Yeah, I guess my other kind of the other angle of this too is the folks who are kind of like my brother, right? Like he's an owner operator
Hmm.
and he's set up as an S corp,
Excellent.
and so he pays himself W-2.
Yes.
And so, he has the business taxes and that side of things. So,
Hmm.
and then he's an employee of his S corp.
Hmm.
So in this case, he owns all parts of the equation,
Hmm.
right? And so he can go and get that arranged for the part. He's got a company that does his one employee payroll processing part,
Yep.
right? And so it's
Yep.
just a matter of getting set up. And then the benefits of both sides of that reality are he gets the smaller portion on the employer side with his S corp, and the
Hmm.
benefit on the employee side on the W-2 side as well.
Yeah, he's going to save over 5 grand a year, assuming
Yeah.
he's paying himself. Assuming he's not opting out of work comp, which he might do. That's a whole separate thing. But even then, he's still saving a lot of money.
Yeah, a
And
couple, three
yeah, he
grand for
wins.
sure, right?
Yeah, he wins on both sides, which is excellent. Especially for people like your situation where it's a one employee S corp. I would tell them, yeah, pay yourself once a month because you can always just take draws any other time, and then just average out, just like as a salary, just average out your days. Figure you had 22 days a month, or say, hey, count the weekdays, or count the Tuesdays through Sundays, or whatever you want to do. However your regular schedule goes, or you can
Yeah.
just report it in into whoever does your payroll and say, pay my salary, but I had 19 days this month, I had 23 days or 26 days or whatever, and they can
Yeah.
figure that all out for you.
Yeah, and even one benefit of, this will make people cringe, but a benefit of ELD and having electronic logs is you have a record and you don't have to page through and go find all those logbook pages and page through it that way, right? You can do it from your truck easily. You don't have to be back home in your home office looking at paperwork and digging out logbook pages. You can just do it right from their web application or mobile application and go look through the days.
You can do it from there if you have a TMS system, which again, one truck company may not have, but some do. Yeah, you can get it from your TMS too. You can just look at your report as a driver. When did I pick up? When did I deliver? And figure out the days I was home.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. It's worth doing. Again, there's so much money. And it also, speaking now it applies to everybody, but for your example, for your brother, it's a great example. He doesn't have to keep receipts for the food or any of that kind of stuff. It's considered an accountable plan. So he gets the deduction, the $80 a day every day that he's gone without having to go, okay, here's my Burger King receipt. Here's my whatever receipt, Old Country Skillet or whatever it's called. Right?
Yep.
Like you don't have to keep all those. Here's my toothbrush receipt because it's for incidentals. You know,
Yeah.
you just get, and I don't know a lot of drivers. I'm sure there's some out there. Not a lot of most drivers don't spend $80 a day.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, because it's
It's
not
your
like
money.
not before when you were only getting 80% of the 50 or whatever it
Hmm.
was, right? Um, but even then that we all kind of know, like that was it was a great benefit because like you're not spending that much money typically. I mean, even now with inflated prices and everything costs, yeah,
Uh-huh.
it's $3.50 for a roller hot dog at the truck stop,
On sale.
on sale, two for $7. Even then, $80 is a pretty big lift to get to.
Yeah, especially because with the hours that everybody keeps, it's not like you're eating breakfast at 8 a.m. and stopping for lunch at noon and stopping for dinner at 5:30.
Yeah.
You're probably getting one big meal and a snack or something like that, and then some like snacks in your truck. And so you're not going to get to 80. The only way you're getting to $80 for most people is if the company directly reimburses you. So then you're like, screw it, I'm going to get $80.
Yeah, yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
bring me that filet.
Not a lot of Ruth's Chris steakhouses at the truck stops.
I hadn't put that together, but I think you're right. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, hardly, now it's not, I mean, that's one of the big gripes is just not even restaurants like the Iron Skillet and some of these other places. I mean, it's been flipped over to, fast food, get it and go, get out of here, type of meals. And so
Yeah, absolutely.
buying a big meal and sitting down and eating it all in one spot is not what it used to be.
No, no, the truck stops have their charm, and that's yeah, that's that make it an Arby's really isn't the same.
Right, right. Well, all right. Well, I mean, is there anything else? I mean, you mentioned your website,
Yeah,
to go over there for some more information, but
we have if I can highlight a couple of great, they're absolutely free. Truckingpayroll.com. We have a couple of things up in the upper right in the menu. You'll see tools or resources and things like that. One of them is a whole page about per diem. It's all the articles we have about per diem from all the different perspectives and all the videos we've done. And it's all there for the consumption. Just go use it. We also have another pull down called Trucking Success Tools. If you go there, there are some quizzes because you might want to know as a trucking company how much you'd save by paying per diem. I'll
Yeah.
tell you, we had someone fill it out last night. I'm not going to go into details of who I know who it was because he had talked to me, and they had 110 trucks and had no idea about per diem. So this is not limited to, I mean, there are big companies that don't know about this and don't, because they don't have they just don't know. And why wouldn't you know? But they don't. I know when I worked there, I didn't understand it till someone explained it to me.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, but there's a thing you can calculate how much you'll save.
Well, that's a
And
very good point, Mike. Like, I mean,
man,
I remember because I sold my last truck in 2014. And so I wasn't around for the per diem as a driver, when the changes went into effect. And my brother was driving for a company and he's telling me, yeah, this is a good deal. I'm switching over to a company and they pay per diem. And I'm like, what kind of scam company did you get hired on to, right? Like, this just sounds like, when's the last time the IRS sat around a room and said, you know what, by God, let's make something that actually works out for somebody, especially a truck driver. And so, I thought it was a scam for years. Honestly, I was in that bucket until he showed me his paycheck and talked to me about it. And I'm like, well, and then I would say I was probably maybe 75% convinced it wasn't a scam because I mean, like we're truck drivers, like there's almost nothing that 100% we believe is not a scam. So
right.
we just haven't found out the other shoe hasn't dropped yet. In
We
10
haven't
years
figured it
we'll
out
find
yet,
out.
but we know
Yeah.
it's there.
Yep.
Hmm.
But I mean this is the case like around the entire industry. Like I mean, if you haven't been closely exposed to it or had explanations about it, it tends to just sound and smell fishy.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because again, it goes to that competition between the company and the driver, where if I win, you have to lose, because there's only so much of a pot of money coming in.
Yeah.
So we're going to distribute it between us. And for me to get more, you have to get less, and you're not going to do that. You're not going to come up
Yep.
to me and say, "Hey, let me get less money so you can win."
Exactly.
That doesn't happen that often. So this is the way we're winning, and the other expenses are going to be less.
You
And so
mentioned
that's
something
the win.
just to clarify. You
Yeah.
mentioned so it is perfectly okay for a business to say this employee we're going to do per diem with
Mhm.
and this employee we're not.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That I mean, it'd be think of it this way for a non-trucking world. If you're a sales rep and you took out somebody for lunch and you turned in your receipt and got reimbursed, no big deal. Another salesperson takes out somebody for lunch, loses the receipt, forgets to turn it in, or whatever. They don't get reimbursed. It's the same
Hmm.
thing. It's just reimbursements for expense. So the fact that the other guy didn't turn his receipt in, I'm not going to reimburse him for lunch if he's my salesman. The guy who did turn his receipt gets reimbursed.
Well, this might this not exactly applicable to truck drivers, but
Mhm.
maybe there are employees at these trucking companies who do some things that it is applicable. Like for example, I just got back from Oklahoma City. I went over to the corporate office and
Mhm.
I do this. I'll be back there in 2 weeks. So sometimes two times a month, sometimes one time a month. In different parts of my career, I traveled 40 weeks out of the year. Is theoretically, could I ask the employer to go? Can I be
Th-
paid for per diem because I'm not at
There
home?
is a way to do it. And you bring up a good point, and I'm glad you brought it up. The per diem that we're talking about under the IRS, they have a section called special rules for the transportation industry as far as meals and incidentals and things go. And
Mm,
that's where this $80 a day comes from. It's all through the United States is $80 a day. Now, somebody like you who say was traveling to a city for a day or 2 days or 3 days, you can ask your company to do it based on the rate for that city. Every city has a different rate because buying lunch in Fargo, North Dakota is not the same price as buying lunch in San Francisco, California.
right.
So there are different rates for everywhere. There's a standard rate if they don't have a rate, but they have different ways of doing it. So you could ask your employer to do it, but your employer doesn't have to do it. That's between you and the employer. The same thing
Gotcha.
with the trucking company doesn't have to pay you per diem. You can't, if you're a driver hearing all this and going, I want per diem right now, you can't just bust his door down or her door down and say, I demand per diem. You owe me this. That's not going to go well. But you can say to them, hey, it's in our best interest. You're going to make some money and I'm going to make some money if we do this thing. Read this guy's website or go listen to this podcast, man. You're going to think I'm a hero because you got 20 trucks. I'm going to save you 30 grand a year for you, and each of the drivers gets about 4 or 5 grand. So we're all going to win together, and you can be the hero, right? That's one of my things
Hmm.
that I like about this is like the accounting department gets to be the hero because we are never the hero. We're
Right.
always the ones delivering bad news. Well, sorry, didn't you shouldn't have taken that load that only paid $500 to go across country. What? We get called bean counters and things, which is fine, but it's yeah, we get to be the hero here. We can save all these people money. But yeah, to be in transportation industry, which is what I wanted to get to, the qualifications for paying per diem to truck drivers. There's two qualifications and only two. Number one, they have to be subject to hours of service laws.
Okay.
Every
I'm
truck
not
driver
it.
is,
Okay.
right? Even if they,
Um,
even if you're in the 150-mile bubble and you don't have the device, you're still subject to the hours.
sure,
You can't
sure.
drive 27 straight hours just around the city. Number two, they have to be in multiple meals and incidental markets. That means they have to go from one. It's not a magic number for miles, but if you leave one city and go to another one, and that's not part of your suburbia,
Hmm.
if you're in Houston and you go to San Antonio, you're fine. If you're in Detroit and you go to Grand Rapids, you're fine. If you're, plenty. If you go from Detroit to Toledo, you're fine. So you just have to be in different markets, and that's the requirements.
Okay.
So I would caution people from if you to use my Detroit Toledo example, they're about an hour drive if you hit traffic right. If somebody goes from Detroit to Toledo and back once in a day, I wouldn't pay them a per diem day for that because they didn't miss any meals. Now, if they just shuttled all day, they got up at 6 in the morning and shuttled until they ran out of hours. Yeah, I would assert that.
Gotcha.
But they do the examples they use generally send people overnight. It's really written for over the road drivers, but the IRS doesn't know how to define that. So yeah, somebody that sleeps in the truck or somebody that could sleep in the truck or something like that, but they don't get into that. They just use multiple meals and incidental markets as their guideline.
So did you say like let's say I'm trying to compare apples to apples
Hmm.
for myself as
Hmm.
I'm a driver and I'm especially we've talked about it can be complicated trying to understand like what is the overall pay package for company A versus company B.
Hmm.
If I'm trying to compare, hey, this company says they do 50 cents a mile and they don't do per diem, and this company says they do 48 cents per mile and they do per diem, which one's a better deal for me? Is there a calculator on your website or anything for them to kind of figure out?
Uh, there's not because there's so many other scenarios that go into it to
Mm.
determining a paycheck and net pay. What state they're in, if they're in a taxing city, if they have 401k or pre-tax health insurance. I mean, all those things factor into it. Just health insurance alone is a big enough thing to swing that. If the 50 cent a mile guy with no per diem paid 100% of your health insurance, the
Yeah,
48
yeah.
cent a mile, right? Like, so I'm just saying there's all these other things that go into it. Uh, I would tell them hit me up on a social and I'll walk them through it. But
Yeah,
yeah.
for sure. Because I mean, let, it's funny because there are all these other things that play into the bottom line of the value of working for company A or working for company B.
Hmm.
But the number that sticks in everybody's head is cents per mile or, percentage, like those two key numbers,
Yeah. The
regardless
top
of the
line
other stuff.
gross.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And so,
absolutely.
yeah, like you said, there's still something that's going to hurt a little bit. Even if I was making 50 cents a mile at one company, I tell my buddy, hey, I'm going to this other company. Oh, yeah, what do they pay? 45 cents a mile. But all my benefits are included. It still hurts the ego a little bit. I mean,
Yep.
it's funny with all the changes in the regulations. So I work for a company that had a bunch of people who were salaried workers, but the salary was quite low,
Hmm.
right? And so because of the changes that went into effect, I don't know, maybe like a year or so ago,
Hmm.
and then they keep changing the threshold, bumping it up. They basically made everybody convert over to hourly pay because there was really no justification for being a salaried employee other than certain benefits for the employer. Like,
Right.
hey, we could ask you to work on Saturdays and it doesn't cost us anymore because you're salary and not hourly, and I don't have to pay you overtime or, extra hours for that benefit to me as a business owner.
Hmm.
But it's funny though, even though the regulation was written really to protect workers from these scenarios that weren't in their best interest. There were people who asked, there was a certain pride of being a salaried
Hmm.
employee,
Their status.
the status to it, right?
Hmm.
As opposed to, how much do you make? I make 16 bucks an hour. Or how much do you make? I make $32,000 a year, essentially the same thing, but
Yes.
there was some internal intrinsic value to the $32,000 a year statement that people were like, I kind of like being salary. And the reality was is because it was a federal regulation, right? There was no optionality here like this one where you can, kind of pick and choose. Hey, if you don't want to be per diem, then you don't have to be.
It's interesting. You mentioned like the salary thing, but yeah, it's there was certain kind of cachet to being a salaried employee. When really you're saying I'm willing to work extra for free.
Right.
That's what you're saying. And I would say too, and I if I encounter anybody who's like that and they go, if two people were next to each other, one said I make $32,000 a year, and the other person said I make $16 an hour, I'd say you also make $32,000 a year.
Right.
It's just paid in hourly sets than instead of a standard check every week.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's man, yeah, that's so funny that you mentioned that because it was a big deal, and that number has been going up. There's always a chance that the current administration will lower it or do something like that, and it always gets fought in court forever. But yeah, you talk about the government having the opposite effect of what they intend. I think that's universal on both sides of the aisle and has been for my lifetime.
Yeah.
And so I can think of all the different laws, the names they give the laws, and it's usually the opposite effect. So it's
Yeah. The one time they seem to get it right is when it directly affects them,
yeah, well,
right?
yeah, they're not subject to
Lawmakers.
their own laws.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
almost every law excludes them. So
yeah.
nice work if you can get it.
Right. And yeah, by the way, we're only going to make laws about things that we don't ever personally experience. So,
Well, and to be fair, trucking is such a different thing
mm,
that you can't. It's hard for them to write laws for trucking. Even when we talked previously about W-2 versus 1099, a lot of the regulations make a lot of sense for a lot of jobs, manufacturing jobs, office jobs, restaurant jobs.
sure.
Everything seems much more clear. But for trucking, like they don't. I mean, the tools that the drivers bring, or whether they drive their own truck or not, they're never going to get into that level of detail just for trucking. You're just going to get set. It always gets set through the court, and then you find another court that goes the other way, and you figure it out. But in general, all these laws, including this special rules for the transportation industry, is the only exception where they have actual trucking laws, because otherwise they
Well,
just
except
defer
for
to.
the exclusions, right? Like in the
Yeah,
1938 Transportation Act, they basically said,
yeah.
by the way, all of our other federal labor laws, right? Like, yeah, transportation's not in that. Like,
Yeah, and it got specifically excluded in the Fair Labor Standards Act, which is why truck drivers don't get overtime. And
exactly. Yeah.
mechanics who work on trucks don't get overtime. And people who load the trucks that go into interstate commerce don't get overtime. Yeah, that's all from the FLSA, like exemption 18 or 20.
Yeah.
Um, Theater workers, by the way, too, movie theater workers don't get it either. Just as a random trivia, one of my coworkers' children work for one of those places, and they don't get overtime because it's like part of a whole entertainment experience or something. Like, really?
Wow.
But yeah, fun. Yeah, now everybody learns something.
Yeah, no doubt. Imagine finding that out the hard way. You know, you go to your theater worker job and you're like, sweet, Saturday shift, I'm on it, boss. Right.
Absolutely.
But
When
what it is though is a great example is I bet you every movie theater company in the country knows that and takes advantage of it in the same way
100%.
that every trucking company in America should be paying per diem and taking advantage of this.
Exactly. And this one's yeah, because it is really optional. Like the theater could still pay them overtime, but yeah, trucking companies, man, this is free money. It's also free love for your drivers, and that's really going to make you more free money. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's no good reason not to do it. Even if you're in like a captive with a really low work comp rate, so your savings are less, you still
Hmm.
should do this. It's absolutely imperative. And if I could, I want to circle back to something that you had mentioned about trucking companies and rolling it out, and that you talked about the 50 cent and the 48-cent guy and all that kind of stuff. If I were a recruiter, this would be a main part of my pitch that we pay per diem to make sure you get more money, and then I would explain how it works. And even if I was a recruiter or not, if I was the person who does driver orientation, whoever that is in your company, if it's a small company,
Yeah.
it's the same person who does the invoicing and owns it and washes the trucks, right? That's you.
And be prepared to walk
Yeah.
through it. Like if you're
Write
going
it
through
higher.
your onboarding a
Yes.
driver from a company that wasn't paid per diem, like you want to be there first paycheck. Let's walk through this so there's no misconceptions or
I don't want to
misunderstandings.
surprise you.
Yeah.
Yep, we don't make jokes about money, and we don't surprise people about money because and I want and even in the orientation you have two paychecks. We're doing this thing, and this is why we're doing it, and this is what you get out of it.
Yeah.
And we want you to know now because that way it won't be a surprise later. And we're also establishing an idea that we're looking out for you. Like let's just give them some love right out of the gate. But yeah, I would have that. That's got to be clear. They shouldn't learn about it on their first paycheck.
Right.
They should learn about it before that, and you should be teaching them, and you can show them that you're looking out for them.
Yeah. And it also is a buffer against the, because you may get, depending, you may have taken a job at, 48 cents per mile.
Mhm.
And then the company down the road doesn't do per diem and they're going to pay 50 cents per mile.
Mhm.
You want your current drivers who you want to keep armed with the knowledge to combat any sort of sales pitch against, your pay package. And just like every company should be, I know you talk about it a lot, but and you mentioned it earlier, like if you're paying per diem, get it in your ad. If you're out there trying to recruit new drivers and you can't put per diem pay in your ad, call Mike over at Superior Trucking Payroll Service and get your butt in gear and get on per diem, people.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you were that driver interviewing in the 50 that doesn't pay per diem and 48 that does, if I'm interviewing the 50 and you say part of your interview question, what's your per diem policy?
Hmm.
It just else you're going to keep the recruiter on their toes. So that's kind of fun. And then,
Right.
right, you get kind of a little fun to mix it up with them. But then also if they say, oh, we don't pay per diem, well, why don't you pay per diem?
Right.
And see what answer they give you. That, I think that's going to tell you a lot about the company. We
Yeah.
looked at it and we know we'd save money, but we think it's too confusing for the drivers. Well, or whatever. Or we don't see the reason to do it. Okay, well, you've got 100 trucks and we had, like I said, we had somebody fill out our per diem tool early this morning. 110-ish trucks, I think is what it was. They're going to save $175,000 a year just for
That's
the
on the
company.
company side.
Yes, on the company side by switching to per diem. Man, I'm just so excited for them. Like
Yeah. Hell yeah.
$175,000.
Yes.
And each of those 110 drivers are going to save about $5,000 a year. So that's, another 550,000. Between the two, they're going to save over $700,000. That's some money.
That's big time money.
So,
Like, I mean, you think about it, flip it around in other words.
mhm.
That is, let's say you make 10% margin in your trucking business, which God
Right?
bless you, because there's
Yeah.
not a hell of a lot of them out there making
So they
10%
need to be your
margins.
next guest, by the way.
Right. Let's like, what's the secret here? Because, I mean, I've done consulting a long time. The best
Hmm.
of the best
Hmm.
is around in that 6 to 8%,
Hmm.
right? That's the
The
best of
people
the
that have it
best.
really dialed in.
World-class operators,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? So, but just to make the math simple, let's say you
Hmm.
make 10% margin, or we can make it half. But if it's 10% margin, in order
Hmm.
to do something else, in order to make that $175,000 a year,
Hmm.
you have to gross $1.75 million
Right.
to make that. Now, if you're at 5% margin, you've got to $3.5 million of gross revenue to net 175. This seems like a hell of a lot way to do it, a easier way to do it than figuring out how to bring in $3.5 million onto your top line revenue.
And you get to pay your drivers more.
And you get to pay your drivers more, which would
Hmm.
not be the case
Right.
the
Which
other way,
will
any other way.
intuitively, it will reduce your turnover because now these drivers know about per diem and they're not going to leave you for somewhere that doesn't pay it.
Yep.
They're just not going to do it. So yeah, it's such a big win. And that's why this is something we talk about all the time. And we'll talk to anybody who will have us listen because it's that crucial. Trucking is so hard. This money stuff is so hard. We're in a 3-year slump that seems like it's never, ever going to end. It will, but who knows when. Man, you can take this win right now. And I talked about the 110 truck trucking company, and that's great. But if you're a 5 truck trucking company, right? Like, man, that's a lot of work because you're the everything. You're the whole office if you're not on the road still. So,
Yep.
but even for you, just on that ratio, because he was about 1750 a truck, right? So that times 5, I just had it and lost it. Well, 8750.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna bust out a calculator, which I don't normally do. Yeah, 8750. I had it. That's $8,750 that you're going to benefit this year. That's, $160 a week right
Yep.
now. And
Yeah.
your 5 drivers are each going to get 5 grand. So that's real money to this guy. And you ask any 5 truck trucking company what they would do with $8,750, and I'm sure they'd find something.
Yeah. There's a bill to pay somewhere for sure.
Uh-huh.
Well, Mike,
Absolutely.
awesome discussion, man. So great to have you back on again, and especially on something like this that can actually make a difference for people's pocketbook right now. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Anytime I can be of help to your audience, I'm happy to do
Perfect. Mike Ritzema, everybody. Superior Trucking Payroll Service,
it.
truckingpayroll.com.
Perfect. Yep. Go there. Lots of free resources.
Awesome.
We're talking trucking life, uncut. The wild stuff, the weird stuff, the mistakes, the memories, and the miles in between. From first jobs to last hauls, the laughs that kept us going, and the lessons that left a mark.
Quick reminder to pay a visit to the friends of the show on social media. Big Cal's Truck and Kitchen, he's got a ton of great posts this last couple of weeks. He's taking his kids out on the road with them. They're having a lot of fun. Really uplifting posts to see him and his kids just having a good time on the road. Reminds me when I was a kid, when either I would go out with my dad or I would get shipped off with some of our drivers. Still can't believe now that I'm the age that I am that was a thing. Just here, take our kid for a couple weeks, get him the hell out of here. Chris Barber, he had posted this week just a quick update on his situation that it seems like July 21st is kind of the big date as far as the next milestone in his court case. Either it gets settled before July 21st or it's back in court July 21st to get a decision made on where it goes from here. Hopefully a final decision on and a good favorable decision for Chris and Tamara on the trucker convoy charges. Superior Trucking Payroll Service, of course, Mike Ritzema, be sure to visit his page. He's got a ton of information on his website, on his social medias, puts out a lot of great content. So we appreciate him coming on here and sharing some of that, but also there's more information that he provides out there on his pages. So check those out. I-95 Truckers, as always, Al's always got great photos out there to check out of big rigs rolling down the highway, especially on the East Coast, up and down the middle of I-95 there in Virginia. One ad I wanted to make this week, shout out to Bob's Trucking LLC. Gary, I know I did warn you, but I figured I'd add this in. Gary was a guest back in episode 4. And he also posts content in our Facebook group. Oh, that's a good segue to join the Facebook group. Channel 19 Experience Trucker Podcast is the name of the group. But also Gary enjoys doing virtual truck driving on American Trucking Simulator. And I've been trying to get myself set up and rolling in there. I'm been kind of slow at it. I'm sorry, Gary. I think Gary may put me on probation here pretty soon, but this past week, he was doing a live stream of him driving in the simulator. And so I jumped on when I got the alert on my phone. It was really a ton of fun watching him, seeing what he was up to. He was in the port of Los Angeles. It just dropped off a load when I jumped in there. And then I was going to pick up another load. I think he was taking it down to San Diego. But the fun part is like when I've been trying to figure out how to do it myself, you get wrapped around the details of like which button to press and how do I move my field of view and things like that. So as an observer, it was really fun because I could think about the chatter and the conversation in the group with Gary and Gary's brother, and there was another guy in there. But also I could observe the intricacy and the details of the game where I couldn't really do that when I was scrambling just not to smash into a fence or a boulder or drive off through the grass in the parking lot at the shipper receiver when I was trying to drive my own virtual rig. So check that out. Gary, you and I are going to have to figure out a way to kind of share maybe some of that, maybe share a video of the streaming video on the Facebook page, but something to check out. It's interesting to see. And I would imagine that there's probably somewhere in our future of trucking where the interaction of these virtual simulators starts to get married up with actual things in the real world moving. We know from just military technology and applications of technology that with drones and everything else, we are flying drones in other countries in military situations that are being flown by people in Tampa, Florida, for example. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out over the years. And finally, I wanted to give a shout out to Left Lane with Lefty, Charles Bundy, aka Lefty. They have a Facebook page and they do live programming like a podcast as well on Facebook. I'm sure they do some other things, but that's what I've been involved with so far. Check them out if you haven't seen their page. They have group discussions, and that's what I ended up getting a notification that they were having a conversation, a kind of a group discussion, panel type discussion on their Facebook page. It was Facebook Live, and there was a bunch of them talking, and then there was folks like me in the audience kind of listening in, and they were talking about the realities of relationships on both sides of the coin, right? From the trucker's point of view and also the spouses. It was a very candid discussion about how hard it can be at times and the sacrifices involved. The people were talking about their own personal experiences on both sides of what it's like and their perspective. And so it was really enlightening to hear different people's stories and different perspectives. So it was great stuff. So check them out when you get some time. Shout out to Left Lane with Lefty there on Facebook. I'm home this week, so pounding the blacktop on the new website. Hopefully get that released this week. Of course, etiquette content continues to get compiled and the trucking legacy work that I've been talking about. Back to Oklahoma City the following week. And now that I've had a chance to meet with a couple of you folks, Big Cal and also Mara and Tony Elliott in real life, just a coincidence of time and location, and it worked out to meet up and say hello in person. I'm really kind of jonesing to say hello to somebody else. So once we get closer to that, I'll put a post up on Facebook. If there's an opportunity, we can meet in person, say hello, and shake hands. That would be awesome too. Summer show season in full swing here. We've got the Texas Trucking Show, which is an indoor show similar to the Florida Trucking Show that happened, I think, back in February or maybe late January. This one's not your typical mats with lots of actual trucks and truck shows, pride and polish, all that kind of stuff. This one's more focused on business solutions and connecting suppliers and truckers and trucking companies. So if that's something that interests you, that's going on down in Houston at Energy Stadium this coming weekend. Their website is texastruckingshow.com. I love it when a website is easy to remember and right to the point. So texastruckingshow.com. And then, of course, also coming up in July, Walcott Truckers Jamboree, Southern Idaho Truck Show. And you've got the website, thetruckshowlist.com, for more information on upcoming shows all across the country this summer and fall. Be sure to keep reaching out. If you'd like to be on the program, like, follow, comment, subscribe, leave us a review, email us at inbox@channel19experience.com. There's also a contact form on the website. Keep sharing the show with your friends. Thanks for listening. See y'all next week. We've got work to do.
This has been the Channel 19 Experience. If it's about trucking, we're talking about it. All uncut. The wild stuff, the weird stuff, the mistakes, the memories. But we talk about the world of trucking today, too. Everything from legislation to lane changes in the industry. We got it covered. Thanks for listening to the show. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like, rate, and review. We'll be back at the ranch soon, but in the meantime, hit us up on social media at Channel 19 Experience and the website at www.channel19experience.com. That's channel and the numbers 19. See you down the road.